followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 8 o'clock in the Middle East, and the people of Gaza await their fate as Israel announces it is preparing for a comprehensive offensive by land, air and sea. Well, it's 6 o'clock here in the UK. It's Sunday, the 15th of October. Today.
As the spiral of violence between Israel and Hamas continues, tensions now spread across the world, including to the streets of London. We'll have the latest on the ongoing situation.
Everyone's expecting a Trump-Biden rematch, but could Americans vote for another President Kennedy?
We have a year and 1 month until the election. Let's go take back our country. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
What are RFK's chances of winning the White House now he's broken off from the Democrats? We'll get stateside analysis for you coming up.
And then Jonathan will have your latest weather forecast.
It's a chilly but sunny start to Sunday for many of us. Will that sunshine prevail throughout the rest of today? Join me for the full forecast later to find out.
And of course, Aidan's got your sport this morning.
Yeah, good morning. At the Rugby World Cup, there was heartache for Ireland and for Wales as all eyes switched to England's attempts to reach the quarter-finals this evening. And in football, there's a Manchester United takeover update.
Aidan, thank you. Good morning. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, as we wake up this Sunday morning, it has been more than a week since the Hamas terror attack on Israel that killed 1,300 people. Since then, more than 2,200 have been killed in Israel's retaliatory bombing campaign.
Thousands of Palestinian civilians in Gaza continue to flee to the southern half of the Strip after Israel's order for over 1 million residents to flee. Even hospitals have been told to evacuate, a move which the World Health Organization says is tantamount to a death sentence.
Well, the people of Gaza now await their fate after Israel announced it's gearing up for a comprehensive offensive involving air, sea and land. The IDF statement added soldiers have a strong emphasis on a substantial ground operation.
Meanwhile, the leader of Hamas is believed to have met Iran's foreign minister at a meeting in Qatar, where they agreed to continue cooperation against what they call Israel's occupation of Palestinian territory.
Well, reaction to the planned escalation has come from all corners. The UN Relief Agency says Gaza is being pushed into an abyss, calling the situation the worst they've ever seen. Russia has asked the UN Security Council to vote on a draft resolution for an immediate ceasefire, with a vote expected tomorrow afternoon.
And the reaction to the conflict is reverberating around the world, with Jewish communities in the north of England, as well as London, bearing the brunt of community tension. Yesterday saw a huge pro-Palestinian rally in London, but opinion is divided on how police should deal with the protests.
Well, we're joined in the studio by Foreign Affairs analyst James Marlowe. Good to see you this morning, James. Can we have a look at what we're expecting? Because obviously the deadline passed 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon UK time, but people are still moving south from the north of the Gaza Strip, and the operation, we're told, is imminent.
I had the opportunity this morning to hear a briefing from the IDF, just an update for journalists. And what they have confirmed by the satellites that they're viewing, plus photography that they've taken, is that Hamas are blocking the roads and stopping the civilians from going south. And this is something that we expected from Palestinian Hamas. They're telling their people to stay where they are. But meanwhile, one of the big concerns for the IDF is to hit the bunkers, the tunnels beneath the ground.
James, we're just going to interrupt you there because we have got one or two problems with your mic, so we're going to sort that out. As we do, let's head to Tel Aviv, where the diplomatic correspondent for the Israeli national broadcaster Amichai Stein joins us now. Amichai, morning to you. What's the latest?
So the latest is we are expecting at some point, maybe even in the coming days, the ground offensive. Yesterday we heard the first time that IDF spokesperson told us that the ground offensive is being prepared and is being completed, the preparations. So we know in the coming days we will see probably some kind of ground offensive. And you need to understand that the big story right now, the diplomatic story, is what to do with the humanitarian issue in the south. US officials told Israel that you cannot have the southern area of Gaza collapsing, because let me remind that on Friday, Israel told all the citizens in northern Gaza to go down, and there is an attempt to find somehow to operate a humanitarian corridor. So the US told the Israelis, you cannot cause a collapse in the humanitarian situation in southern Gaza due to the due to the people from Gaza going down. So these are the main two stories right now. Other than that, unfortunately, the rockets are still flying from the terrorist organization. Israel is still striking massively targets inside Gaza, but these issues, the humanitarian issue and the ground offensive, this will be probably the main issues of this week.
Yeah, the humanitarian issue is something that I suppose everybody foresaw, because Israel was telling everybody to evacuate and go south. Hamas was telling people that they must not do that. And clearly, there's a changing invective you sense from world leaders actually saying that the humanitarian issue is paramount. But how can it be at the same time that Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying the offensive is going to start, it's going to be air, sea and land?
Listen, first of all, Israeli officials are telling all the people who live in northern Gaza, whoever stays, this is putting your life in danger. Now, we're seeing Hamas stopping these people from going down. They're putting roadblocks and things like that to stop people in the north going down because they're using them as human shields. Now, Israel can wait until a specific point. You can't drag it on forever. Now, when you're talking humanitarian issue, again, Israel is understanding that there will be probably some kind of humanitarian corridor to assist what's going on in the south. But at the end, Israel is saying, listen, we are on a fight for our lives after this massacre of this brutal murderous terrorist went in last week. So Israel is giving the time for the people in the north to go south, but at some point it will have to start also the ground operation, and that Hamas is trying to prevent people from going down. Again, he's using them as human shield. We saw satellite images of roadblocks and things like that. So Israel is giving up to a specific point, and then things will change.
What is happening in terms of attacks on other fronts? Because we're getting reports that there has been a successful rocket attack on Tel Aviv, that there have been attacks coming in from Syria, that there have been more attacks from Hezbollah in Lebanon. What is happening there?
So we're seeing the northern front getting a bit of much more tenser than we saw next week. We saw Hezbollah, the terrorist organization, taking much more responsibility for attacks against Israel, even issuing films and videos of his attacks. But and there was something, but the start of the real debate in Israel whether you should do a preemptive strike against Hezbollah. There's more and more calls, by the way, amongst Israelis, let's say, leading people or experts saying you need to do it right now, but at this point we're not seeing it happening. It's, let's say, Hezbollah is doing what you can call of annoyance when it comes to what's happening in northern Israel, meaning it's not doing a full-scale attack. It allows the Palestinians to do attacks against Israel and try to infiltrate. These things are happening, but it's not going all the way. Will it go all the way? We don't know yet, because at the end, it's only their decision. That's why we see more and more calls in Israel. You need to do a preemptive strike against Hezbollah before it can unleash its force against Israel.
And what part do we know of Egypt? What part is Egypt playing now?
We are seeing all the countries, by the way, not just Egypt, as a part of mediating for some kind of, let's say, hostage release by the terrorist organizations in Gaza. We're seeing Egypt, we're seeing Qatar, we're seeing Turkey, we're seeing a lot of diplomatic frenzy around the world. We're seeing European leaders talking with Arab leaders about this issue. We're seeing Secretary Blinken being in Saudi Arabia for the second time in less than 24 hours. So we're seeing everyone, let's say, talking with everyone about this issue. Again, two topics. A, as ceasefire, and B, is the story of the hostages and the people who Hamas kidnapped from Israel. These are the two issues. No one is trying to talk about a ceasefire. No one is trying to say we're mediating to stop the hostilities. Right now, these are the main two issues when it comes to the diplomatic sphere.
OK. Amichai, going to leave it there. Really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. We've sorted out that mic issue with James Marlowe, the Foreign Affairs analyst. James, thanks for hanging on with us this morning. In terms of... I mean, Amichai was talking about ceasefires and saying, well, it's not an option at the moment. It struck me, it struck all of us, actually, Russia is calling for an urgent vote at the UN Security Council about a ceasefire. The nerve, frankly.
Yeah, the irony.
Well, firstly, Amichai picked up on many points, and he was correct in many of the points of the civilians going south, which Israel said, and it's not clear exactly when Israel will go in. But with regard to Russia, with regard to your question, one of the reasons why Russia has called for this is because of the pressure on it from Syria and from other countries that it has connections with, i.e. Iran. And there's no other reason. Of course, the news around the world has now completely been blanked out with regard to Russia and Ukraine because everyone is focused on Israel. I had the opportunity last night to look back at some video and look back exactly, or almost this time last week, of what took place. And just as a reminder, it was more than 2,500 Palestinian Hamas terrorists crossed the border into Israel. They went to various kibbutzim, moshavim, the towns, the villages, into an Israeli base, and they just opened fire. Now, the Israelis managed to capture dozens and dozens of Hamas fighters, and they've interrogated them. I've seen some of the video that has been released, and they were asked, what was your objective? And they said our objective is just to come over and kill and behead and rape and do anything that we can. And they were asked, why were you asked to do that? And they said, because that's what we were told to do.
That's their life's objective, actually, isn't it? It's what they're taught.
Well, the Palestinian Hamas has a doctrine, has an objective, has a policy, a manifesto, which says the complete destruction of Israel, all of its citizens, plus it still has written down its clauses with regard to destroying Jewish people all over the world. But nobody seems to focus on that. Now, I think what we're seeing on the streets of London, which I think they're going to move on to soon, and various other places across, not just in the UK, but also in Europe, is that people have just forgotten what war is all about. Israel never wanted this. Israel's very much focused on its industries. It's a leader when it comes to technology, to artificial intelligence, when it comes to innovative. That's the reason why the Abraham Accords were signed. The main reason, because the Gulf states realized, you know, Israel is a powerhouse when it comes to innovation. We want some of this. We can actually give our money. But of course, now things have very much changed. And this was the objective, or one of the many objectives of Palestinian Hamas.
How does anyone explain the giant failure of Israeli intelligence when it comes to this attack? I mean, I gather people are beginning to actually blame the Prime Minister for it, saying it's a lack of government or something.
Well,
nobody seems to be able to explain it.
Well, and it won't be explained for some time, because first, now there's a war, and now you have the main opposition party led by Benny Gantz, who's come into the government, and there is a war cabinet which is set up, and Benny Gantz, along with Gadi Eisenkot, his second in command and a former chief of staff, is on that war cabinet. Right now there's war. There's plenty of time afterwards to have a probe and to report exactly what took place and how it took place. I can tell you what has been released, and that is that on that Friday night, of course not 2 days ago, but Friday night a week beforehand, there was activity that was seen on the Gaza border. It was picked up by the IDF. It is something that has taken place for a long time. It was put down to another operational training course, either by Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and it was left alone. Of course, that was a fatal mistake. This is exactly what took place in the 1973 war. And I was a young man at that point, but I remember exactly the front pages of the newspapers when I was 10 years old. So at that time, Israel was caught sleeping, but after a few days, it managed to get the upper hand. And that's exactly what's going to take place over here. The reason why there's a lot of caution is because there are so many underground tunnels inside of Gaza, and that's where the fighters are. That's where Hamas, Palestinian militants, terrorists, well, excuse me, I'll use the word terrorists because I think that's okay.
Yes.
Because at least 19, and I looked at the pictures last night, at least 19 of these hostages are children aged from 6 months old, most of them 3 or 4 years old. One of them is 16 years old. That's at least 19. You've got elderly people there over the age of 80, 85 years old. You have a Holocaust survivor who was taken away. Their families have admitted that they're on daily medication, as you would expect for somebody over the age of 85 years old. If they don't get that daily medication, it's not clear what will... Well, it is quite clear what's going to happen.
Well, yes, yeah. Look, James, we've got to leave it there, I'm afraid, but it's good to see you this morning. Thank you.
Well, it's 16 minutes past 6. If you've just joined us, a reminder of the top stories this morning. Thousands of Palestinian civilians in Gaza continue to flee to the southern half of the Strip after Israel's order for over 1 million residents to flee, as Israel announces it is gearing up for a substantial ground operation.
The UN Relief Agency says Gaza is being pushed into an abyss, calling it the worst situation they've ever seen.
And thousands descend on the capital here for huge pro-Palestinian rallies, including former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. But with rising community tension and reports of hate crime, opinion is now very much divided on how the police should actually deal with these sort of protests.
Now, earlier this week, Robert Kennedy Jr., the son of assassinated Senator Bobby Kennedy, announced he will run for president. but as an independent candidate.
Yes, he's actually an anti-vaccination activist and he's an environmental lawyer. His chances of winning the election next year are pretty slim. He could, though, impact a close race between others.
Yeah, not everyone's happy, though, not least his 4 siblings who've released a statement saying the decision of our brother to run as a third-party candidate against Joe Biden is dangerous to our country. Bobby might share the same name as our father, but he does not share the same values, vision or judgment.
That's quite stern, isn't it? Let's see what Steve Gill, the former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations, makes of this. A very good morning. Lovely to see you again. Did this come out of the blue, or do you think he was always going to do something like this?
I think that's been the plan for a while, because the Democratic Party has really been shuttering him to the sideline, not really giving him access to actually politically get involved in the way he would like. But man, wouldn't it be nice to pull up a chair at the Kennedy Thanksgiving luncheon in about a month or so? That's going to be a fun table to sit at.
Yeah, couldn't it just? I mean, look, talk us through exactly who he is, because he has proved to be, hasn't he, a bit of a controversial character, as, well, the Kennedys often are.
Well, and it's interesting because a lot of people in the United States are trying to figure out, as an independent, will he pull more from Joe Biden if he's the Democrat nominee, or will he pull more from Trump if he's the Republican nominee? And I think right now people don't really know that much about him. They know his name. They know some of the kind of top line issues that he's talked about. But I think a lot of people are putting on him their own impressions of what they think he's for, that they think he agrees with them. And I think as he gets more specific on issues, he's going to lose some support, actually on both sides of the aisle. And it will be difficult for him, in the way our process works, to win electoral votes, to actually win the votes in states that are the key to get the electoral votes to get elected. So I see him as more of a spoiler, and I think his spoiler status will go down as people find out more about where he actually stands on the issues.
Well, what sort of a character is he then?
Well, he has a lot of the charisma that the Kennedy family is known for, and he is certainly a guy that has an image of speaking bluntly and directly, again, whether it's on the vaccine issues, whether it's on questioning the U.S. involvement in the Ukraine-Russia conflict and the amount of money that's being spent without a lot of accountability. So on those sorts of issues, he has some appeal to sort of that independent-minded, common-sense voter in the U.S. But at the same time, he has expressed a lot of opinions that are sometimes seen as anti-Semitic. And right now in the world, this is not a time to be seen that way in U.S. politics. Also not a strong proponent of gun rights. And I think there are a lot of other issues, including abortion in the United States, where he's trying to sort of have it both ways. On one hand, appealing to the pro-abortionist in the U.S., and at the same time, he took a posture just a few months ago where he was willing to draw the line on abortion at a 3-month level and then backtracked on that. So again, I think as he gets into the arena and gets better defined on the issues, he's going to lose support rather than gain it.
Yeah, but as you say, as a spoiler then, and it is difficult to judge his position, but if he is a sort of spoiler candidate, who do you think, Steve, will suffer more if he gains, you know, is he going to potentially sort of hive off Democrat votes or Republican votes?
First of all, again, because of our electoral process, you have to win state by state with sort of this patchwork quilt across the United States. So he may do very well in New York. He may very well do good in California, but he's not likely to tip the balance in either of those states against the Democrat candidates. And I don't think he'll have a lot of sway in a lot of the dark red states, Republican states, either. So I think at the end of the day, he probably hurts Democrats like Joe Biden worse than he hurts Donald Trump. The other question is, how does he play down the line? What voters does he turn out that may cost Democrats or Republicans U.S. House seats or U.S. Senate seats? And right now, the map in the United States is poised very strong for the Republicans to gain seats in the U.S. Senate. My view would be, how does he affect those races down ballot? Do people stay home? Do they support him? And then who do they vote for, depending on who he votes for, they vote for at the top of the ticket? What happens when they go further down the ticket and start voting for local races, House races, and U.S. Senate races?
And historically, I mean, in any other time, if you were talking about the possibility of another Kennedy candidate, you would expect him to have enormous support, particularly from his political side, but also from his family, and enormous sums of money, which we all know is needed to fight that sort of campaign. And yet he doesn't seem to be very popular with his own immediate family, does he?
Yeah, I think, as you pointed out at the outset, the scathing response by his family is something that I certainly didn't expect. I expected they would at least be kind to their family member. And when we have the way U.S. politics works these days, you have campaign finance limits that are so-called hard money that you have to use to run your actual campaign. And then you have the soft money where unlimited donations can go into these super PACs to fund the TV commercials and everything else. I don't know that he has the big donors, the billionaires that can be putting tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into super PACs that are really essential in the American political scene now. When you're limited to how much an individual can give, you can only raise so much money, and that's what pays for your travel. That's what pays for the actual campaign apparatus, and he may have a hard time on both fronts.
OK. Well, interesting times ahead. Interesting to have a third-party candidate anyway.
Yes.
Steve, as always, it's good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Right.
I mean, you think the name would...
Yeah.
I wonder if those people who are out saying now, oh, we're going to support him, are just doing it for the name.
Well, the name is magic, isn't it? There's no doubt there. But when you get a sort of scathing reference like that from your own family, that doesn't look too good. And you need, as he said there, you need tons of money to fight an election like this.
It seems odd in
And he's
itself,
a very,
doesn't
what
it?
you might call a colourful character. There's all sorts of aspects, not only to his political life, but I think to his personal life as well, which make him sort of tabloid fodder, I might call.
I have to say, I didn't think his speech was, or the bit we saw, it didn't seem to be on top of his game.
Not very magic,
particularly.
was it? It was
no, it
shouty.
wasn't. But anyway,
we'll
watch it
as you say,
closely.
it's interesting to see a third character in the running.
It's been a long time, hasn't it?
Hasn't it?
I mean, the Ross Perot back in the day and all that sort of thing, they never get anywhere.
No.
But anyway.
Made life interesting, though.
Were you cold this morning?
I am not cold at the moment, but it was Anorak Day today, coming in. I think it's cold out there. Funnily enough, it's quite warm in here in the studio today, so I'm not moaning.
No. Let's see what Jonathan's got for us.
Hello there, very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. There is a lot of fine weather around throughout the second half of the weekend, and that is thanks to high pressure that is with us across the UK, helping to keep things relatively settled. We do still have some showers to watch out for, primarily across northern areas of Scotland. It will be a cloudier day here as they push their way through. Might see a few showers fringing eastern coastal areas of East Anglia as well. There will just be a bit of a breeze in the east and the north, but elsewhere light winds, a lot of sunshine to be had and staying largely dry as well. You may still need a layer though as you head outside. Temperatures not going to be much higher than 9 to 13 degrees Celsius for all of us. Those fine conditions hold on as we head into this evening and overnight. Again, any showers tending to move their way back towards coastal districts, and a lot of dry weather to be had across the board, really. A few mist and fog patches forming overnight, particularly towards dawn tomorrow morning. And again, it is going to be another cold night for 3 degrees Celsius in towns and cities, certainly dropping below freezing levels for rural areas. A frosty start to Monday morning. Will be a bit more cloud around on Monday compared to recent days, so the sunshine a bit hazier in places. Breezier for the far southwest as well, the winds picking up here again. Showers likely to be limited to the far southeast as well as the far north of Scotland. Temperatures relatively similar to the days before, 9 to 13 degrees Celsius. High pressure holds on into the middle part of next week, but we could potentially see something a little bit more unsettled later on. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
I don't like the look of all those icy-looking arrows whirling around the map, and I think it's probably time to get the winter duvet out of the airing cupboard.
And the scarves out and the gloves.
That's right, all of that winter togs.
There you go. Now we've got the sports news heading your way with Aidan in just a moment, and we're also going to look at the weather in a bit more detail as well. This is GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time! Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
It's 6:29. Aidan's here with all the sport. Turn away now, if you're Irish. I mean, look, they've quarterfinals again. They can't make it through. It's a real shame.
It is indeed. I mean, but it just shows you how important psychology is in sport, doesn't it? I mean, people say to me, "Oh, what does it matter that they didn't make it past the quarterfinal 4 years ago, or 4 years before that, or 4 years before that?" It does matter because this was the best chance Ireland had in the whole generation, in fact, in their history, to win this World Cup. They looked imperious against South Africa earlier in the tournament. They faced New Zealand, who are just one of those pedigree sides who, it doesn't matter what kind of form they're in, they say there's no such thing as a bad New Zealand team. And you know what, Anne, the key thing last night was the start. Ireland always start quickly, but last night they simply weren't allowed to by a very aggressive New Zealand pack. They got 13 points ahead in the first 15 minutes. And once you do that, you're chasing the game all the way through. Ireland struggled to keep up. They played some brilliant rugby. It was the best game of the tournament. This is why we'll miss Ireland, because they've been involved now in the 2 best games of this tournament. And don't forget, it's a tournament that's taken a very long time for us to get through. Yeah. So we're looking for highlights as much as we possibly can. So they're a sad loss. And as I say, quarterfinals again, it's a mental barrier there. What I would say, though, they've got young players coming through. Johnny Sexton finished last night, the captain. He finishes up at the age of 38, but they do have good players coming through, and I think they will do it at some point in the future. But then tonight we have to look at England, because England have, in contrast to Ireland, they had a massively easy route through the pool stages, and they're playing Fiji tonight. I know Fiji won Twickenham back in August, but I think this is a huge opportunity for England this evening. I really do.
Oh, is that the kiss of death, Aidan? What time is it? 4 o'clock.
It is 4 o'clock in Marseille. Yeah, it's going to be watched by the Princess of Wales. Wales, we should say, were lost yesterday as well. They played a brilliant game against Argentina, right, but just about fell out short. So at least now we've entered the knockout phase, we're starting to see the Rugby World Cup deliver in terms of entertainment. But goodness me, it started 5 weeks ago. It's almost...
Well, I was backing New Zealand yesterday, so who will I back today?
Well, you've got France and South Africa are underway at 8 o'clock this evening as well in Marseille. And it was 2 wins for the Northern Hemisphere, for the Southern Hemisphere yesterday. So England
deserve it.
England and France are hoping to turn the tables.
I'll put my money on England today.
Did the Princess of Wales see the Wales game?
Yeah,
no, it was Prince George went with Prince William.
Oh right.
Yeah,
as long as
there's pictures of them looking a bit disappointed.
Well, he's actually a patron of the Welsh Rugby Union.
All right. Good. As long as there was a Wales at the Welsh game.
Oh, there were.
Oh, yeah.
And not just at the English game.
Oh, they're well represented. Yeah.
Now, what Sir Jim Ratcliffe forecast is about to get is, we think, a quarter of Man United?
Yeah, it wasn't really a development we were expecting. It wasn't the shift that Man United fans were expecting. I was in the executive areas at Manchester United.
Oh, you would be. You would be.
10 days ago, chatting to the United fans, and they say Aidan, full sail only. We want a full sail only. We want somebody to come and completely take this thing off the Glazers, lock, stock and barrel, and then we can move forward. Now, this is the issue. As of next month, the club has been up for sale for 11 months. So we're almost talking about a year. We moaned about how long Chelsea took. I mean, that was a hostile takeover because extraordinary circumstances because of the Ukraine war. Roman Abramovich had to sell the thing. But now we're seeing, officially, I think now the Qatari bid has walked away. 5 bids they've made. Now, they valued it at £5 billion plus £1 billion to upgrade Old Trafford and the training ground, and another £1 billion to clear the debt. Not enough for the Glazers. They wanted £6 billion in cash. It leads us to ask the question, do the Glazers actually want out of Manchester United, because the Radcliffe bid would see them take 25%, and apparently they're close to agreeing this, Stephen, 25% of the club, and that values it at £1.5 billion. What's interesting is that the New York Stock Exchange values it only at £2.7 billion, but as we know in business, a company is worth only what a seller is willing to pay, and in this case, they're willing to pay a lot more, because it's one of the probably only franchises, any club in the whole wide world. It doesn't have to win trophies, and it's still an enormous
still, the
cash
name
cow.
is huge, isn't
it's
it?
Still, they make money without even being successful. And so
How can it be a huge cash cow if they've got £1 billion worth of debt?
Because the Glazers have loaded debt onto the club. It doesn't mean it's not profitable. They use that debt to buy the club. So it's effectively a mortgage. It's not debt as we understand it, but it's still debt nonetheless. And the Qatari bid wanted to, were asking to, well, they were promising to clear it, and that's why the United fans will be disappointed, because this keeps the Glazers in the club, and they don't want to let go of this thing. And the United fans are hugely disappointed because there's protests outside the ground on a regular basis now to get them out. And it looks like they're not going anywhere soon. OK, Aidan, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you later.
From one national obsession to another, and that's the weather. Because usually at this time of year, and it's no doubt at the moment, they're forecasting an Arctic blast, apparently in Britain, which is going to bring snow, frost and sub-zero temperatures this weekend as parts of Britain brace for -4.
Oh, daytime temperatures in southern England could, though, rocket to 10 degrees. Be 10 degrees... No, what's this? Nathan Rouse here. Explain it, Nathan.
What's going on?
Because I didn't understand those words.
It's getting a bit colder. Right, we have got a cold front moving down, or this is actually coming... We talked about Arctic blast. This is coming from the north. We were talking last week about temperatures of 25 degrees when Scotland had a lot of rain. The cold front was over Scotland. This cold is now moving right over the UK.
It's the same one, is it?
It's the same one. It's the same cold body of air that's coming over the UK, and that is going to bring these very, very cold temperatures. Now, the -4 that you mentioned, that is going to be in Scotland, and these are overnight minimum temperatures. So we're not talking about -4 during the day in London. It's probably going to be around 10, as you said, up until midweek, and then later on in the week turning a little bit milder. But this is possibly, this is going to be the coldest spell of autumn so far, and possibly since last winter. Yes, because it's been very mild.
Well, it's been exceptionally mild, and in fact, some days really warm.
It has.
And then suddenly we're going into a cold blast again.
Yeah, I mean, this time last week, I was sat in this very seat talking about 25-degree temperatures and summer making a return.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about winter arriving and snow and defrosting cars. That's something we're going to have to look out for this week, because overnight skies are going to be clear. So that's going to make it very, very cold in the morning, and it's going to bring the ideal conditions for frosty cars.
So why is it that we see, and it's been we've had it all year, that we seem to be spinning on a dime from lovely weather to very wet weather to hot weather to cold
and
weather
none of it
very
lasts
quickly.
Too long.
Yeah. This summer has been all over the place. I mean, I've mentioned this a lot of times since I've been in warmest June on record, and then we've had coldest on record, wettest, warmest. It's been all over the place, and really we've been at the mercy of the jet stream. The jet stream really dictates our weather. The jet stream dictates how high pressure builds, and high pressure in the summer brings the hotter weather, and in the winter brings the colder, drier weather. Low pressure coming in from the west brings the wetter, more unsettled weather, and this is already dictated by the jet stream. And then when the jet stream is further to the north, we get the warm air coming up from the south. And that is what we saw last week. The jet stream has now moved south over us, and now we're getting the colder air coming down from the north. But the jet stream has been all over the place, and that's really what happens to our weather. And we're in the part of the world where that can happen. It's not unusual that we see this huge fluctuations in weather. I mean, I'm always saying that in this country, one of the great things about our weather is that we can be talking about being in summer one day and in winter the next. We're right at the mercy of the jet stream.
Keeps you in business, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm having a great time, and I'm never out of here.
How does this bode for the winter? Because there have been people, I mean, months ago saying we could be in for a very cold winter.
Yeah.
Is that looking as sort of as if it could happen?
Well, now, I have to caveat anything I say with long-range forecasts, certainly seasonal forecasts, are very, very difficult to make. I always say 5 to 10 days in advance is pretty much the most you can do with any certainty. However, this year we are looking at an El Niño year. Now, El Niño is a phenomenon in the eastern Pacific, which is the warming of the coast around Peru, and that is a phenomenon which can affect global weather patterns. Now, in the UK, that can bring more of a low-pressure dominated system, which would mean stuff coming in from the south and from the west. So an El Niño winter for us might mean more unsettled and milder, rather than very, very cold and very, very snowy, like we saw in 2018 when we had the beast from the east. But it's only an indication, and it's very, very difficult to say with any certainty this is exactly what's going to happen. But if you're going to make a sort of an estimate of what this winter will be doing, you'd be looking at global climatic patterns, and El Niño is one of them, and we have El Niño going on.
Oh, well, that's not necessarily bad news then, is it? Because with the heating bills going up again, then that actually might be a bit of a...
mild winter might be good.
Yeah. But that said, you know...
There's no guarantees.
There is never a guarantee, no.
I'm going to get you a T-shirt made, Nathan, that you can wear on air when you're on, saying, I can't guarantee any of this.
Don't listen.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you
Don't believe anything I say.
I'll tell you what you can put on a T-shirt for me. Now, here's a word for you before I go. Now, this is an Icelandic word, glukaverus. There's any Icelandic people out there who are watching this, they're probably going to go, glukaverus. Glukaverus. Now, this describes the phenomenon whereby when in the winter you're sitting in the house and the sun is blazing through the window, and when you step outside, it's actually freezing cold. That is called glukaverus, and it means weather window.
Oh, that's nice.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, that's quite interesting, actually. I like a new word.
A new word. Yeah. Throw it in. You'll be able to throw that in.
Glukaverus.
Glukaverus. In other words, stand behind glass and you might feel warm.
Yeah. Yes. Lovely, Nathan. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Indeed.
Do stay with us, it's 6:38. Coming up, a new poll suggesting that 1 in 6 of us share a bath with our partners. We'll be discussing this and more in Headline Makers.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
6:41, good morning. Let's have a look at the papers today. And of course, the crisis in Israel is dominating the front pages.
Yes, The Observer looks at Israel's warning to those fleeing Gaza. The next stage is coming, they say.
Israel poised for Gaza invasion, says the Sunday Times.
And The Telegraph also leads with Israel's ground operation coming up in Gaza.
Sunday Mirror, Escape to Hell, as it features the powerful image of a Palestinian man carrying an injured child.
While the Sunday Express highlights the Prime Minister's words, "We stand by Israel, always."
Well, let's go through some of the headlines this morning with the Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, author and broadcaster Nikki Hodgson. Good to see you both this morning. I don't know how to phrase this, but I'm struck by the front pages that they seem... that they're not... You couldn't in any way say they are anti-Israeli, but the fact that there is so much focus on the Palestinian side of this, does that flavour things in a way? Because it's so hugely difficult, isn't it, when you look at the the horrific attacks on Israel, but you also look at what is happening in Gaza and the concern for civilians there, and it doesn't seem overly balanced to me.
I mean, I suppose I was thinking about this as well, actually. I suppose at the beginning of the week, we were commenting on immediately what had happened in Israel. And I think the focus really is now on what will happen in Gaza. So I guess that's why it's been covered that way. I mean, it's very difficult. It's a very difficult job for a newspaper editor to know at what point you've had too much coverage of one side and maybe you look biased. I personally don't feel it is at that point yet. I think it's just this very real humanitarian disaster that may or may not happen.
It's funny because I was struck the other way. I thought the front pages were beginning to reflect both sides a little bit more.
Really? Yeah.
They tried to balance. They're picking... If they're picking a picture of somebody in Gaza who's been terribly injured, they're also putting alongside it a story from the Israeli point of view. I think they are struggling, you're right, with how they're trying to balance things.
Yeah, I think that's right. I suppose it is sort of directly following the story. I mean, it's tragic that, you know, there is a danger that we will forget quite quickly the horrors that happened just this time last week. But the focus is naturally on the Palestinian side at the moment, given Israel is preparing this, you know, all-out ground, air and sea invasion. So it remains to be seen what will happen there. People are obviously, you know, worried about the casualties, understandably, as in any... you know,
well, you've been looking at US Today, where they've been talking about, and I've seen a lot more of this, about the amazing lifeline that WhatsApp is beginning to provide.
Yeah, it's unusual because normally we hear stories about how awful social media is and what a malign force it is on the world and spreading misinformation, blah, blah, blah. But here, you know, we see how essential it has become, particularly WhatsApp, not only for sharing information, but for, you know, families knowing whether their sons and daughters are alive, knowing their location. Lots of people in the US, in the UK, they will have relatives either on the Israeli side or in Gaza, and they, you know, now they can sort of keep up to date with what's going on. And it seems as if there's also been a case where WhatsApp has been absolutely vital in saving lives. There was this mothers' WhatsApp group in Miri in the kibbutz that was attacked near the Gaza border on Saturday. And people were sharing vital information, like how do you lock a room properly in an emergency.
Yes, they've all got safe rooms. They were all talking about rushing to safe rooms, but then immediately contacting each other and saying, how do I lock the door of my safe room?
How do I get it to work?
Yeah.
And also giving, you know, real-time updates of, I've heard the gunman here, you know, run this way. And potentially, you know, many tens of people's lives will have been saved, we know.
And this is just an ordinary WhatsApp group shared by mums in the kibbutz.
This is just ordinary mums giving, you know, sharing information in a way that, yeah, potentially will have saved lots of lives. I mean, obviously, we know that that community was visited with absolute tragedy. I think around 1 in 10 people who lived there were killed, you know, literal decimation, but any, you know, life saved is something to be grateful for.
Well, yeah, indeed. Look, it is 6:45. If you've just joined us, let's remind you of the main news this morning. Thousands of Palestinian civilians in Gaza are continuing to flee to the southern half of the Strip after Israel's order for more than 1 million to evacuate, as Israel announces it's gearing up for a substantial ground operation.
And the UN Relief Agency says Gaza is being pushed into an abyss, calling the situation the worst they've ever seen.
And thousands have descended on London for a huge pro-Palestinian rally, including former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. But rising community tensions and reports of hate crime, well, opinion really is divided on how police should deal with the protests. Nikki and Fraser still here. Nikki, let's have a look at the Mail on Sunday, should we? civil servants are backing Extinction Rebellion, according to this man who threw glitter over Keir Starmer.
Yeah, so the guy in question, he's called Yaz Asmawi, I think it is. You would have seen at the conference, he was the guy that interrupted Keir Starmer's speech and glittered him, and Labour have now taken opportunity to use that as some marketing. It's kind of been quite positive for them, actually. I actually don't think this is news, because I think we've known about this for quite a while, but he's making the distinction between Extinction Rebellion and the Just Stop Oil protesters. And he's saying whereas the Just Stop Oil protesters haven't got the support of civil servants and kind of senior figures in government and people that work around that industry, Extinction Rebellion have, and that perhaps because they've been a little bit more restrained in their efforts, they have allowed the civil servants who are kind of really pro-climate stuff to get on board with them. He hasn't named names, you know, so he's sort of... I mean, it's kind of a bit of... I don't know, maybe it's a bit of an exaggeration about how much support there is. Somebody saying good work or, you know, somebody directly working with the group is quite different, isn't it? So, yeah I think we'll have to wait and see what actually happens with that.
No, fair enough. It's an odd one.
I find it quite alarming, though. I mean, if it is the case that there is large support for Extinction Rebellion, because we should remind ourselves.
It's not so long ago they were gluing themselves to roads.
Yeah, and you know, I think because they no longer carry out these tactics, people have assumed that this is you know, the sort of sensible side of the green movement. But we should remind ourselves what their goals are. They want carbon neutrality by 2025. That's in 2 years' time. So if civil servants genuinely think that that's possible or desirable, I'd be interested to know, you know, which hospitals are they planning to close down, how many flights are they planning to ground, how many old ladies' boilers do they want to turn off?
Yeah.
I mean, it is a deranged proposal, and it's quite alarming that, you know, supposedly sensible people aren't running away a mile away from this.
This will intrigue you too, because I know you're a bit geeky like me and Anne. The asteroid, Bennu, that NASA went up to get samples and brought it back down to... It's an incredible story. Anyway, what is in the samples? That's what we need to know. Let's talk to Andy Lound, our favourite planetary scientist, who joins us now. Andy, have NASA actually said anything yet, or do we get an unveiling today of these analytics?
Good morning. Yes, we've had some preliminary data pushed through, which is quite interesting. In fact, there was that much material there when they opened the canister, the material started to spill out, which caused a delay to collect the materials, because they got about 250 grams of materials, far more than expected. And some of the preliminary stuff, which is sort of a look-see to see what's there, has been very exciting. Water-bearing clays are actually within the sample, which has always been thought that they might be available on an asteroid. And this has been a very important discovery for a number of reasons. One, it's thought that water-bearing clays were brought to the Earth when the Earth was starting to form 4.5 billion years ago. And these were the materials that were started to build up our planet itself. So that's an important discovery. Lots and lots of carbon, which is is there, 5% by weight. Big, important discovery. And again, this is thought to be where the building blocks of life itself were actually brought to the Earth. Magnetite, which is usually always get from asteroids and meteorites anyway, but nonetheless, lots of samples of that is in it as well. So far, just the look-see has provided the evidence to suggest this is exactly the material we wanted to grab hold of, and heaven knows what is going to be discovered when they actually go into extreme detail. But there is so much material of it, it'll be scattered around the world, partly for display, partly for research. And 70% of the sample is actually going to go into cold storage for future scientists using techniques that have yet to be devised to look at.
It's a fascinating project, the whole thing. When did we first get this canister back? How long has it been on Earth?
Oh, it's just been about just a little over, was it 2 weeks now? So it's not that long ago, though the mission started in 2018. So it's been a long wait for us to actually get this done. But the opening of the canister has taken quite a few days, partly because you wanted to open it in a clean environment. Special laboratory in Texas has actually got the canister. And of course, as I said, when they started to open the canister, the exciting bit happened is there was dust all over the place and they had to immediately stop. to try and analyse what on earth is going on here. Is this dusty material from the spacecraft itself? Had something gone wrong and it was black material from the spacecraft? Or is it material from the asteroid? So there was a delay then in trying to actually get the collection sorted out, because they need to collect every piece of material they can, because it's so vitally important to us.
Oh, it's fascinating.
When you said it was, very, very quickly, Andy, when you said it was water-bearing clay, does that mean there is water in what they've found there?
Yes. The water is actually bound up in the clay itself. And this is an important discovery for a lot of reasons. One, the distribution of this material to the Earth in the early days. And it also means that the asteroid possibly could be mined for that water in the future, which they split up the water into oxygen and hydrogen, and again use that as fuel for spacecraft, or combine it again to use for electricity and heat as a hydrogen fuel cell. So yes, it's a very big discovery, that is, and that there is so much water in the solar system, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, that
Good
in
stuff.
itself is fascinating and quite new, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Andy, really good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Does that excite you, Fraser?
Oh, unbelievably. It just gives you so much sort of hope, I guess, so many bad things going on in the world. And then a reminder of the greatness, the great things that humanity can achieve, when we set our minds.
Because the exciting thing about finding water is that there's a possibility of life.
A possibility of life, and, just the fact that we can even do this, the fact that people are so interested, that we're interested in discovering the origins of our universe is just great.
Talking of water...
I knew you'd say that.
Yeah, well, it's a precious resource, is water. Nikki, the Sun on Sunday is saying that more of us are sharing bathwater.
Well, did some people ever stop sharing bathwater?
Well,
because when I was growing up in Wakefield as a northerner, as a family we shared bathwater because there wasn't enough to go around. It's what you just did on a Sunday with your brother or sister, isn't it?
You
didn't necessarily get in the same bath, but you shared the water.
Yeah.
This story is actually saying that people are sharing baths.
Yeah.
Because they're feeling broke, basically. 1 in 6 bath with a partner or friend, a poll shows.
Friend?
Is it friend in a loose term, or I don't know?
Special friend.
Friend with a special friend, exactly.
Yeah, special friend.
But yeah, apparently people in Leeds are, which is where I'm from pretty much, are the most likely to share the bathwater. But people in Liverpool, Nottingham, Manchester and London are a bit shy about it.
Is it a cultural thing? Is it more up north than down south?
Well, that's what I thought. I mean, I'd consider Liverpool north.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I don't really know why that doesn't work
what's
out.
wrong with you Scousers? Get in the water together. I mean, in the Dixon Towers...
Dixon Towers.
We have baths together all the time. Yeah. It's just nice.
Loads of people do.
Romantic.
Yeah, it is romantic. Actually, it's a very affordable romantic thing to do during the cost of living crisis.
I don't think so at all. Honestly.
Don't you?
Love people as I might have done in the past. I really wouldn't fancy sharing a bath at all.
Oh, it's lovely to get one at either end.
Who gets the tap end?
A big bath.
I get the tap end.
Actually, I even get a bit squeamish about jacuzzis.
But
jacuzzis
in
somebody else's stew, aren't you, basically?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's the cleanest way to go about things, but isn't it also, I don't understand the people saving money.
Yeah, I mean, there is a serious cost of living point to it, that people are taking fewer showers and just using water less in general.
Have we got time to very quickly show our Angela? How brilliantly Angela Rippon is doing on Strictly at the moment. Of course, the latest video of her doing the splits and doing the high kicks and everything has gone viral. Should we have a look? Wow. She turned 79 just a couple of days ago.
I'll tell you what, that's a good wig, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a great dress.
It's good. You wouldn't know it wasn't real hair, that.
If she doesn't win, it will be the biggest stitch-up since the bio...
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Since the when?
Since the bio tapestry.
Oh, very nice.
No,
I feel like you said that before.
Very clever. Anyway, let's get a check on the weather and we'll see you two later on.
Hello there, very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. There is a lot of fine weather around throughout the second half of the weekend, and that is thanks to high pressure that is with us across the UK, helping to keep things relatively settled. We do still have some showers to watch out for, primarily across northern areas of Scotland. It will be a cloudier day here as they push their way through. Might see a few showers fringing eastern coastal areas of East Anglia as well. There will just be a bit of a breeze in the east and the north, but elsewhere light winds, a lot of sunshine to be had and staying largely dry as well. You may still need a layer though as you head outside. Temperatures not going to be much higher than 9 to 13 degrees Celsius for all of us. Those fine conditions hold on as we head into this evening and overnight. Again, any showers tending to move their way back towards coastal districts, and a lot of dry weather to be had across the board, really. A few mist and fog patches forming overnight, particularly towards dawn tomorrow morning. And again, it is going to be another cold night for 3 degrees Celsius in towns and cities, certainly dropping below freezing levels for rural areas. A frosty start to Monday morning. Will be a bit more cloud around on Monday compared to recent days, so the sunshine a bit hazier in places. Breezier for the far southwest as well, the winds picking up here again. Showers likely to be limited to the far southeast as well as the far north of Scotland. Temperatures relatively similar to the days before, 9 to 13 degrees Celsius. High pressure holds on into the middle part of next week, but we could potentially see something a little bit more unsettled later on. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Well, we've got plenty more still to come for you. Of course, the very latest news from the Israel-Hamas conflict. We're across every little bit of that, and we'll bring you the latest. And of course, we've got our reporter, Charlie Peters, who's on the ground, who's going to have the latest for us throughout the course of the day here on GB News. Don't go anywhere.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
It's 9 o'clock in the Middle East, and the people of Gaza await their fate as Israel announces it is preparing for a comprehensive offensive by land, air and sea. 7 o'clock here in the UK, and it's Sunday, the 15th of October. Today.
As the spiral of violence between Israel and Hamas continues, tensions now spread across the world, including to the streets of London. Our reporter Charlie Peters is live on the ground in Tel Aviv and will bring you the latest throughout the programme.
Back here, we all know that what food banks are, but as vulnerable households across the UK struggle to afford their heating bills, thousands of warm banks are now in operation. We've been to one, and we'll tell you what it's all about in a moment.
Labour is planning to trim down some of its key pledges as they try to keep their manifest credible as the party prepares for its best chance at winning a general election in decades. But what policies will be facing the chop? We'll have more of all of that and the rest of today's headlines later on in the programme.
And of course, we've got all your weather today with Jonathan.
It's a chilly but sunny start to Sunday for many of us. Will that sunshine prevail throughout the rest of today? Join me for the full forecast later to find out.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, it's been more than a week since that horrific Hamas terrorist attack on Israel that slaughtered 1,300 people. Since then, more than 2,000 people have been killed in Israel's retaliation.
Thousands of Palestinian civilians in Gaza continue to flee to the southern half of the Strip after Israel's order for over 1 million residents to go there. Even hospitals have been told to evacuate, a move the World Health Organization has said is tantamount to a death sentence.
Well, the people of Gaza now await their fate after Israel announced it's gearing up for a comprehensive offensive involving air, land and sea. The IDF statement added that soldiers have a strong emphasis on a substantial ground operation.
Meanwhile, the leader of Hamas is believed to have met Iran's foreign minister at a meeting in Qatar, where they agreed to continue cooperation against what they call Israel's occupation of Palestinian territory.
Well, reaction to the planned escalation has come from all corners. The UN Relief Agency says Gaza is being pushed into an abyss. They say it's the worst situation they've ever seen. Meanwhile, Russia has asked the UN Security Council to vote on a draft resolution for an immediate ceasefire, with a vote expected tomorrow afternoon.
Well, our reporter Charlie Peters is on the ground in Tel Aviv and joins us now live. A very good morning to you, Charlie. What's the latest?
Yes, well, last night the IDF said that they would be striking the Gaza Strip in that coordinated and complex attack from the air, land and sea. But those comments came as the UN said that the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is untenable. We still don't have clear details on the latest from Gaza on how many civilians have fled south after that warning 48 hours ago now that they needed to get out of the north of Gaza and head south of the Wadi Gaza. Last night's briefing with the IDF's chief spokesperson, he said that hundreds of thousands had fled, but wouldn't give a precise number, and any opportunity to learn further about that situation was interrupted as rocket fire came in on Tel Aviv, and the press briefing was interrupted as we all took shelter. Last night's rocket attack was the first successful rocket attack on Tel Aviv in central Israel since the war started, with at least one large missile landing about a few miles south of our location in the southern suburbs of the city. But the Iron Dome air defence system does continue to intercept the vast majority of missiles sent in from Gaza. But also last night there were more troubling developments in the north. We saw Lebanese Hezbollah release footage of them launching anti-tank guided missiles on Israeli positions in the north of Israel. And we saw the resumption of artillery fire coming in from Syria. And this comes as last night we saw footage of the Iranian foreign minister meeting with Hamas chief political leader as tensions grow and people fear that Iran may start to engage in these hostilities as the IDF push into the Gaza Strip. Could this localised conflict become more regional and therefore more devastating?
Which is a huge international concern, Charlie. Obviously, I mean, when countries like Iran are getting more involved, when Syria is, as you say, attacking as well, or missiles being fired from Syrian territory, which of course is Russian-backed. This just escalates it out of control.
Absolutely, and in the north of Israel, they are facing an area known to analysts as the Shia Crescent, that stretch of land from Iran through Iraq, all the way from Syria into Lebanon, where the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the asymmetric special forces unit of the Iranian military is able to operate with great freedom. It can sustain its forces out there. It can prepare the ground to launch attacks. And I think we've already seen some of those attacks in the last 7 days. And the great fear now is that as the IDF launches that comprehensive and large-scale force into the Gaza Strip, that first ground invasion of the territory since 2014, will they also have to suddenly fight a sustained and surging enemy on the north? We know that they've sent hundreds of thousands of reservists to the north, and tank convoys have also head up there while also preparing in the south. But can they fight two great oppositions at the same time? Many fear that Lebanese Hezbollah actually have greater capabilities than Hamas, who are already causing so much trouble for the IDF day and night. Can they fight on both fronts? Well, last night, the IDF chief spokesperson conceded that there had been some struggles with logistics, but that they are gearing up, and they had to, gear up over 500,000 soldiers. And this was an obvious strain and was always going to be a struggle, but they are moving in the right direction.
And of course, the evacuation order has been and gone. The deadline has been and gone yesterday. And yet we know there are still civilians in Gaza still trying to flee. Is there any sense from the IDF that they're going to hold off for a bit longer?
Well, it's clear that the Israeli move is attempting to be limited by those nations in the region, particularly Qatar, the US and Egypt, as they try and, through diplomacy, find a greater humanitarian solution for the people of Gaza. But so far, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, none of his humanitarian shopping list demands are being achieved. There are no humanitarian safe zones in the south of Gaza. Yesterday, there were reports that the crossing into Egypt, the Rafah crossing, would be opened for 4 hours so that people could exit, particularly foreigners caught up in the conflict. But no reports of that crossing opening were received up here. It doesn't seem to have happened. And so the question of proportionality: can the Israeli Defense Force launch that imminent ground invasion while so many civilians, millions of them, flee or are internally displaced in their own territory?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the ongoing issue here, isn't it? Because as much as the international community, in general terms, supports Israel's right to self-defence, Israel's right, actually, to strike back against terrorists, the more there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza as a result, even if you argue that that is the fault of Hamas, nevertheless, the tide begins to turn somewhat, doesn't it?
Yes, and I think we have already started to seeing that shift in world opinion. Last week, obviously, after the atrocities from southern Israel, of those reports of what was happening in the kibbutz and those small communities was travelled around the world, people started to consider Hamas in that ISIS-style butchery, as Benjamin Netanyahu put it. But since then, more and more global leaders have publicly urged restraint on the part of the Israelis. Last night, Germany making a significant intervention there, urging the Israeli side to reconsider before they launch even greater munitions into the Strip. But of course, the Israelis consider the Gaza Strip as a place of two layers. On the top is that civilian layer, where millions of people live in one of the most densely populated areas in the world. And that second layer is subterranean, those underground tunnels and shelters, hundreds of kilometres of them, where Hamas militants can gather their supplies and prepare to launch attacks. If Israel wants to achieve its stated mission, which is to destroy the Hamas military capabilities, then it will need to get to that second layer. So long as civilians are on the top and are living in their homes, in residential areas, it can't reach them. It can't use those more severe munitions.
And the more we read and learn about the everyday life of people living in Israel, near Gaza, or indeed Palestinians living inside Gaza, you start to realise that they have been living with decades of potential conflict. So many of them write about having safe rooms in their houses, having bomb-proof shelters actually in their own houses. Are you aware of any of that? Probably not in Tel Aviv, exactly where you are.
No, every building here has a bomb shelter. Every house has a shelter, because rockets do come in here regularly. I mean, as I said last night, one landed a few miles south of us, and we heard dozens of interceptions by the Iron Dome defence system. People here are forced to run within 90 seconds notice quite regularly away from rocket attacks. Yesterday we had 3 air raid sirens, and so shelters across the country are commonplace, but they don't anticipate to use them as much as they have done in the last week. And indeed, many people here are discussing this as the worst violence they've seen in 50 years. And fears are now growing after last night's successful rocket attack on Tel Aviv that this location could also become more susceptible to rocket fire, additionally, if the Iranian proxies in the north also get involved.
Charlie, as we talk to you, we're looking at live pictures over Gaza and smoke rising. We've just seen what would be a couple of explosions. Now more smoke rising from a different location. I mean, as we understand it, this major offensive hasn't yet started, but Israel still targeting areas, it would seem, where they believe there are Hamas militants gathered, or at least significant supplies gathered.
Yes, and we're still waiting for the latest updates from the IDF on strikes they conducted last night. Preliminary reports based on other sources that we've looked at this morning seem to suggest that it was just in the dozens, and it's common before invasions that there is a sudden dip in activity before the great surge. So that could be another indicator and warning of that imminent invasion that many have anticipated over the last week. But they are definitely still hitting targets, in particular air defence capabilities that Hamas has, and also anti-tank units. We know that 2 nights ago, when they conducted what they described as localised raids, the IDF said that they were targeting anti-tank teams in their raids on those border areas in the Gaza Strip. So clearly a preparing situation in order to allow heavy armour to move in for the first strike on the Gaza Strip.
OK, Charlie, we'll leave it there, looking at those desperate pictures there live from Gaza of just a relentless bombing campaign, or rockets, not quite sure, but we're just seeing every so often some sort of deadly-looking explosion.
And as we await, as Charlie was saying, await this operation, land, sea and air, Benjamin Netanyahu says. And quite what that is going to be like, we do not know. People still fleeing where they can, but there have been reports and briefings claiming, and it wouldn't come as a huge surprise, it has to be said, that a lot of Gazans who are trying to flee south are being blocked by Hamas militants who don't want them to go because they provide a human shield.
And also, meanwhile, I mean, the sense of terror, I guess, is spreading across the globe. So many different communities all over the world are reacting. And yesterday, thousands descended on London for huge pro-Palestinian rallies, including former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn.
It was largely peaceful, but with viral social media videos of some attendees appearing to express support for Hamas, opinion is divided on how police need to deal with the protests.
It makes it very difficult for world leaders, political leaders, to respond. Our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, has the latest on how the conflict is affecting the UK, joining us now in the studio. It is amazing. I mean, you get this feeling that the tensions are now spreading across the world, and different world leaders and secretaries of state and foreign secretaries are having their say, and they're pleading for restraint whilst also appearing or wanting to appear to support Israel.
Yes, absolutely. And just a word quickly on the protest. I was there most of the day yesterday in London. Incredible scenes, but I would say, given there was probably over 10,000 people there, very largely peaceful. I think there were 15 arrests in total. A lot of those were after the main protest had finished in Trafalgar Square. There were some altercations. But some of the pictures that you saw from that rally that went viral, I wouldn't say those were representative. The vast majority, a real mix of people from all ages, backgrounds, and largely peaceful. But, I mean, we've had rallies like that taking place across the country and, indeed, across the world. And we see a divide in how that's dealt with too, because countries like France, like Germany, have banned pro-Palestinian rallies, and yet in France they happened anyway. They used tear gas. So very difficult. Now, in terms of the international response, both Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer issued statements yesterday, of course, on the anniversary of those horrific attacks by Hamas and those appalling atrocities committed in Israel, both saying very similar things. Rishi Sunak, we stand with Israel, not just today, not just tomorrow, but always. Really unequivocal support from him and indeed across the West for Israel and the right to defend itself. Keir Starmer, similar, but Keir Starmer also stressing the fact that Israel must act within international law and saying they need to ensure safe humanitarian corridors in Gaza for those fleeing violence.
But the argument, but as we're hearing, and again, it's unless you're actually there seeing it, you don't know for sure. But what we're told and what is coming from the Israeli briefings is these humanitarian corridors are being blocked by Hamas. And so where does that leave politicians? Because no one's reflecting that politically, are they, over here? And it's the pressure on Israel to provide a route for people to evacuate. But there's no comment about the fact they're being blocked by their own.
Well, I think we can safely say that Hamas is really no friend to the Palestinian people, and certainly not the people in Gaza, who by and large are completely innocent. Hamas, one of the leaders, is in Qatar, so this doesn't affect him. They are very happy to use innocent civilians to shield them as human shields, as you said, irrespective of the consequence. But of course, even if these people can get through to the south, where do they go from there? They can't get out. There's a lot of international pressure now being brought to bear. They would desperately like this crossing into Egypt at Rafah to be opened. They would desperately like humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. But at the moment, that's not happening. Now, Gaza, it's one of the most densely populated areas in the world. There was over 500,000 people were displaced even before the order for the people in the north to flee. And there's something like 20 hospitals in the north, including people on life support, babies in incubators. Those people simply can't move. Absolutely horrifying situation.
There is a big international question here as well, looking further forward. I mean, there's so many possibilities as to what could happen. But if northern Gaza is flattened by this, then what do the people who've been moved south go back to?
It's a very good question, and it's not clear at all. And as we know, the water's been cut off. There's no food going in. There's no power. There's no energy. It's already a humanitarian crisis. It seems that it's going to get a lot worse, and we don't know what Israel's end strategy is. It's clear that they want to eradicate Hamas, completely understandably, over the events of the last week. But what happens then? What happens to these couple of million people, however many end up alive at the end? What happens to this area? That's very, very unclear. And meanwhile, there's huge concern that other neighbouring powers may get drawn in. We've seen, Hezbollah in Lebanon to the north. We know that Iran is involved, is no friend of Israel. Real concern that this conflict may not stay between Israel and Gaza.
Egypt have opened their border at, is it Rafah, to American citizens wanting to get out. And don't we hear that may also happen for British citizens trying to get out, but not for Palestinians at the moment?
Well, certainly there's a lot of pressure being put on Egypt for that to happen, but if you don't have dual nationality and it hasn't happened yet for UK or America, what about everybody else? It really is a horrendous situation and no good option, it seems, at the moment. And of course, it looks like it's going to get potentially a lot worse.
Never before have I come across something where you look at it and you go, this is quite simply a lose-lose situation. whichever way you look at it.
I mean, you can understand Prime Minister Netanyahu, you can understand his language that he's using at the moment. We will eradicate Hamas. We are coming in by air, sea and land. It is going to happen, what they're calling it the Great Surge. And yet, at the same time, he will know that innocent Palestinians trying to flee are being blocked by Hamas. What does he do? Does he order them to go in? Does he order the Great Surge to start?
And
knowing that innocents will die.
And why did Hamas do this in the first place? Because they obviously must have known that hell on earth would be visited on the people of Gaza. It seems that they wanted to get this reaction because things had been more peaceful, hadn't they, in that region?
Yes.
For a while, there were talks of deals with Saudi Arabia. They've seemed to want to kick everything up, and by goodness...
and for what will anyone get left with at the end, as you said? I mean, the whole place flattened. How do you rebuild an entire strip of land that big? I know everybody says it's smaller than the Isle of Wight, isn't it? But 25 miles long and about 5 miles wide, I think. But what will they get left with, any of them, at the end of it?
I'll tell you what's interesting, the international view on... I don't know if it... Was it Keir Starmer that said about a proportional response? And there's always been in the Israeli-Palestinian issue for decades a huge debate about what is a proportionate response from Israel, because they are seen to go in hard.
Well, they are.
But it's how does the Israel will always say its response is proportionate. How does the international community judge whether that is the case?
Well, I mean, looking at the figures of the people who died, and of course many thousands injured on both sides, but at the moment there's about 1.3 thousand Israelis died. I think we're already up at about 2.2 thousand Palestinians. That figure is clearly going to go up and up, but...
So what we don't know out of that 2,200 is how many are civilians, and certainly a number are, and how many are Hamas.
Oh, the Hamas figures are being counted separately, so there's 2.2 thousand ordinary Palestinians plus 1,500 Hamas terrorists that I don't think anybody cares too much about.
Response.
Killed.
Even you could argue, and I'm not necessarily, but the Palestinian innocents who are dying because of the war that's happening now, it's not quite the same, is it, as the Israeli people who were deliberately butchered at the beginning of this over a week ago. I mean, I don't know how you argue that sort of thing, but I can understand the Israeli feeling that nothing justifies that.
No, but I mean, there was a sign at one of the march yesterday saying one atrocity does not justify another atrocity, and it's horrendous. But of course, you are under international law, and the United Nations seem fairly clear that they believe Israel is breaking it, is on the wrong side of it, not to target civilians, and what many people see as collective punishment, that basically Hamas have done these horrific things, slaughtered young children, old people, horrendous, but that the whole of the Palestinian people in Gaza are now subject to collective punishment of no food, no water, no power, being driven out of their homes.
And meanwhile, we were talking earlier about the unbelievable irony, or cheek, as you said it, I think, or the nerve, of Russia now appealing to the United Nations for a vote on a ceasefire. It's calling for a ceasefire.
Quite incredible, isn't it, given the events of the last year and a half in Ukraine, that Russia, of all countries, should be standing up to say this. But just one more point. Crispin Blunt is a Conservative MP. Yesterday, he was saying that he thinks that leaders do need to be very mindful of what they say in terms of... He warns about them falling on the wrong side of international law in saying support for Israel is unequivocal. No matter what Israel does, they will be foursquare behind them. But, of course, none of us understand what it's like to have gone through what Israel went through last week, do we?
No. And I mean, there was... they talked about it being their 9/11, didn't they? And actually, when you put it in... Because I thought at the time, well, that 9/11 was so extraordinary. But actually, when you put it into... break it down, 4,000 people killed in the initial part of 9/11 in the United States, out of a population of, I don't know how many million. There's 9.3 million people in Israel, and they lost 1,300. Proportionally, it's huge.
It is huge, and it's the biggest loss of life of Jewish people since the Holocaust, isn't it?
I think we have to remember that, don't we?
So extraordinary, and I think Jewish people around the world who really thought that they would never see horrors on this scale again, and yet here we are, and we have Jewish people, kids, the schools have been closed, people going out hiding the Star of David because they're worried about being targeted in 2023.
Absolutely.
Oof.
Incredible.
It is incredible.
But I do think you raise a valid point, Anne, when you say, and it's not, and I know some people won't like it, but there is a difference between terrorists going in to slaughter civilians and the tragedy of civilians dying in war. There is a difference. Now,
there is a difference, but it's very difficult to...
It's not to
justify it in any way. But I mean, it's interesting you said that the Jewish people haven't seen anything like this since the Holocaust. The barbarism that was shown on that first attack over a week ago sort of reflected the sort of barbarism they had come to witness in the Holocaust. And that is more unforgivable, isn't it, than war itself? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. If any of us had answers, we'd, politicians would be cleverer than us and be solving this, wouldn't they?
Well, they would. I tell you, someone, I can't think of who it was now, yesterday we were talking to, said people have forgotten what war is like. Because people get extremely anxious, and it's not to dismiss it, but about civilian casualties. That's what war involves. And that's why war needs to be avoided at all costs. But you have to say, Hamas must have known that was going to happen. And now they're preventing civilians from leaving. So they know that they have a disregard for their own citizens, or the people they are claiming to stand for, which needs to be taken into the equation somehow. I mean, it's as I say, it's lose-lose, either which way.
Well, I'll tell you what, have a look at this. Because as Israel anxiously awaits updates regarding the over 100 hostages taken by Hamas from Israel into Gaza, GB News reporter Charlie Peters has spoken to the mothers of some of those missing in the chaos.
This is Maya, my daughter, 21 years old, and Itai, my son, 18 years old. ביום שבת, בשעה 10 בבוקר שהתעוררתי.
Miri woke up on Saturday, October 7th, in 10 a.m. and discovered everything.
התחילה בלגן. קמתי, הייתה לי הודעה ממאיה.
She woke up with a message from her daughter, Maya.
And she said to me,
Maya sent her that there were missiles and she's okay, she's hiding, don't worry, everything is okay.
ויוצאים הביתה, הנה משטרה הגיעה.
At 8 a.m., Mirit received another text message from Maya. There's a lot of mess in here. We're trying to get our way back home. Few minutes, we will come back. There is police all over the place. Later, she received 2 text messages from Maya. Mom, I love you so, so, so much. If I don't have the battery, please call to Itai. She received many phone calls from many numbers. She called back one of them. It was Itai's friends. He told her, Mirit, you have to open the TV. There is a lot of mess in the south. She called the father, Ilan, and he told her that in 8:58 a.m., Maya sent him a message, voiced message, Dad, they're shooting at me. Please come to pick me up. And hung up. She sent him a location and he went to search for her all over the place. So on Saturday, many videos were posted online. In one of the videos, they recognized Itai and Maya together with a friend of them. Everyone was running all over the place. They were walking, but they recognized they were together, the 3 of them.
עד הערב עוד היינו אופטימיים שאולי...
That was the last time confirmed they saw them together, but in the meantime, Ilan, the father, went to search for them in the south. They had so many hope that they will just come out of a bush that they were hiding. But in the night of October 7th, they received a video. In that video, they saw Itai with his friend handcuffed in a vehicle of Hamas, in the back of the vehicle of Hamas. That's how they found out that Itai is abducted. Since the last message, she doesn't know what's going on with Maya. But 45 hours of the abduction, the Israeli army come to confirm that both Itai and Maya, they saw in their phone location, they're abducted by Hamas. They don't know what's the situation with them, but they know for sure that they're there.
That must have been the most appalling moment when the IDF, the army, told you that your children had been taken by these terrorists.
She says it's absurd, but they were so relieved to know that they're abducted, because that means that they're not 100% dead. That gives them hope that they might be alive. So it was a nightmare, but they have hope. She believes they must come back, but she knows that each day that passes, it's more and more dangerous, and that's why she wants to raise the awareness, because they're civilians that all they wanted was to celebrate in a peace rave. They're such a young, optimistic people that they were talking about this party all the time. They wanted to dance, and they would never know they will end up by Hamas. She said it's even more horrifying because it's a peace rave. It's young people, civilians that harmed no one. They were talking about this party for weeks.
Charlie Peters there talking to two mums.
I mean, how do you respond to that? And there's as we keep getting, and there is tragedy on all sides of this. But you're talking to a mother there who, those young adults, have been taken out of sheer hate.
Yeah, and they were at a peace rave.
And the chances of them coming back?
I hope they get them back, but yeah, the chances don't look good.
Next to nil.
Right, we've got lots more coming up for you on the programme, and it won't all be as terrible as that, I promise you.
No.
We're going to do our best to cheer everybody up. Right now, I don't know whether this is going to cheer you up or not, but let's catch up with the weather.
Hello there, very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. There is a lot of fine weather around throughout the second half of the weekend, and that is thanks to high pressure that is with us across the UK, helping to keep things relatively settled. We do still have some showers to watch out for, primarily across northern areas of Scotland. It will be a cloudier day here as they push their way through. Might see a few showers fringing eastern coastal areas of East Anglia as well. There will just be a bit of a breeze in the east and the north, but elsewhere light winds, a lot of sunshine to be had and staying largely dry as well. You may still need a layer though as you head outside. Temperatures not going to be much higher than 9 to 13 degrees Celsius for all of us. Those fine conditions hold on as we head into this evening and overnight. Again, any showers tending to move their way back towards coastal districts, and a lot of dry weather to be had across the board, really. A few mist and fog patches forming overnight, particularly towards dawn tomorrow morning. And again, it is going to be another cold night for 3 degrees Celsius in towns and cities, certainly dropping below freezing levels for rural areas. A frosty start to Monday morning. Will be a bit more cloud around on Monday compared to recent days, so the sunshine a bit hazier in places. Breezier for the far southwest as well, the winds picking up here again. Showers likely to be limited to the far southeast as well as the far north of Scotland. Temperatures relatively similar to the days before, 9 to 13 degrees Celsius. High pressure holds on into the middle part of next week, but we could potentially see something a little bit more unsettled later on. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Well, that picture behind Jonathan looks nice, doesn't it? All the autumnal leaves.
It's going to be crisp and autumnal, I think, though.
Actually, it can be nice. Autumn can be a lovely season, so fingers crossed.
Well, I tell you what, shall we talk Madonna next? Because it was her big concert, kicking off her celebration tour last night at London's O2. We'll find out how it really went down with everybody.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're looking at other stuff completely now because we need to lighten things up a little bit. So I thought I'd give you a teaser. Yeah. Oh, yeah. A strawberry is not actually a berry.
It's a fruit.
But a banana is a berry.
A banana's a berry?
There you go. Throwing it out there for you.
Why did you suddenly throw that into the mix?
Well, I just did. I just thought it'd just, change it up a bit. Okay. Stephanie Tetchy knows all about these things. Stephanie, tell us about strawberries and bananas.
Lovely.
Madge was back on stage last night.
So 4 months after Madge was in intensive care for acute septic shock, she was back on stage. She was talking to fans that she didn't think she was going to make it. And, she was in intensive care. There was a lot of questions.
Her family at the time said they were worried.
There was a lot of questions whether she could still go ahead with this celebration tour, which is going to be going all over Europe. But she is the queen of pop. So, as you can imagine, she put on a fabulous show at London's O2 for 2 hours, and they call it the Celebration Tour because there's a celebration of her 40 years of music hits. So you can imagine she played Vogue, Papa Don't Preach, all of the ones that fans wanted to love. But as you can imagine, Madonna is a political activist when she's ready. So there was a moment where she took a pause to think about all of the devastation that's been happening in Israel and Palestine. And there was moments she even did wear a Ukrainian flag as well. So I think she did use her stage for good.
Mind you, it didn't all go smoothly, did it?
No, there was at one point where the sound totally went off, which was a bit of an awkward moment, but she did make up for it, like more than 40 hits. And let's talk about the outfits, guys. She had an amazing wardrobe. She's got 45 trunks worth of costumes, and 17 of them have been reimagined from what she's wore in videos, on stages, so it was a feast for the eyes.
It must be a heck of a job for the wardrobe department as well.
She's got 25 people working on her wardrobe.
And she must have to do very quick changes, mustn't she?
I don't know how she does it, but there was at one point she was wearing a leg brace because she's had a hip replacement following her last tour, so she still is in a lot of pain, and she's got 3 physical trainers with her, and she's created a mobile gym so she stays in shape.
Oh, wow.
All of those outfits must be designed with sort of one zip up the back or something.
They must
so
be.
she just steps into
rip.
them. Yeah.
But they're quite risque. I have to admit, from what I've seen, she was barely covered up last night. She looks in good shape for a woman who's 65 years old. I
my
mean,
goodness, is that how old she is?
She's 65 years old, and some of the outfits she was wearing is stuff that you would probably see on a 25-year-old, but this is Madonna, so she gets away with it.
Talking about older stars, then, if I can put it that sort of way. Michael Caine.
Yeah, 90 years old, and he's finally announced he's retiring.
Good on him.
There's been a lot of talk about Michael Caine, whether he's ready to, you know, take his final bow when it comes to acting, and now he says he is ready. He says he's played a leading man, which he did in his last film, The Great Escape, and it got fantastic reviews, but now he says he wants to concentrate on novel writing.
Oh, look, there he is with Glenda Jackson.
Yeah, and Glenda Jackson stars in the film. It was her last film before she died. He's saying he's now ready to concentrate on writing novels.
Yeah, he says that nobody writes good leading parts for men of 90.
He says they just want younger, handsome men and women, so I can imagine, but I think
it's fair share, though, hasn't he? He's had a stellar career.
He starred in 130 films, so he can, you know, take a bow with much pride, but he will be missed. I like the old showbiz greats because they just bring this sense of integrity to films and movies.
They do, but why he wants to start writing books now,
I
not
wonder
just
what
go
he's gonna
fly
write
fishing.
books
Go
about.
fly fishing,
No,
Michael.
I think writing a book will be relaxing.
Oh, well, good on him. The man is a legend, and I've never had the pleasure, but he always comes across as being, like, just a really nice bloke, actually.
Yeah.
Stephanie, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you later on.
True Brit, wasn't he? Coming up, when you think of the best way to model fashion, does falling down the stairs come to mind?
No.
We'll be discussing the latest advert with exactly that happening and much more in Headline Makers coming up in the next couple of moments.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
7:46. Hello.
Welcome back. Yeah.
Yes.
You're watching and listening, of course, to Breakfast here on GB News with Stephen and Anne, plus the deputy editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, and author and broadcaster Nikki Hodgson, because it's time for Headline Makers. And Fraser, I don't know, should we go to the Observer first, talking about how Labour are trimming back on some of their key manifesto pledges?
Yeah, so the Observer article is focusing on Labour is not going to make any big reforms of social care, which is slightly worrying if they're going to be the next government, because everyone knows that social care is one of the big problems facing the country, one of the big problems, one of the big drains on the NHS.
But also one of the big expensive things to deal with.
Hugely expensive for families, hugely expensive for the state. It prevents a lot of people from leaving hospital because we don't know where to put them.
Why would they row back on that? Because that really is important.
It is important, but essentially parties have been stung before by trying to say they're going to reform social care in the run-up to elections. So in 2010, Labour was accused of wanting to impose a death tax to fund social care. In 2017, people remember Theresa May was accused of wanting a dementia tax to fund social care. So this is one of those things, this is a tricky issue where, you know, parties can get caught out, or if they present their plans in the wrong way. But it's slightly worrying because it's part of a broader pattern, essentially, with Keir Starmer, where he's saying, actually, a Labour government, it's not going to change much. They don't want to spook the voters. They don't want voters to think that they would be radical. And that, in the current context, where Britain has so many problems that need fixing, you know, where we're in an economic mess with high inflation and low growth, NHS on its knees, you think, actually, no, now is the time, I think voters would think, now is the time for a bit of boldness, for a bit of change.
Do you? I don't know.
I mean, their argument is that they will do it, they'll just do it in a second term, or they'll do it later, right? So I think what they're trying to do is avoid disappointing voters, because that happens, obviously, we've seen that with the Tories. So many things that have been in the manifesto haven't come to pass. So I guess they're working from the other position. But I do agree with you, Fraser, it's like, just take a risk, because people want change.
Well,
like, be bold.
If Keir Starmer just stands up and says, all right, well, we're going to tackle inflation first and you know, and say rather boring things like what Rishi Sunak says and Jeremy Hunt, but then who do we choose between?
Well, exactly, and you know, on the economic front, you know, the announcements from the Labour Party conference, where they're going to have this new fiscal lock that's essentially going to keep them constrained to the kind of spending plans of the Tories. I mean, it's similar to actually how New Labour approached things. People often forget that they said, you know, in the first couple of years, they would stick rigidly to the Tory spending plans, and then things changed in the second term, so to speak. So I think that's, you know, but this is in the new Labour mould. And
we don't want to hear that.
But this is a reassurance, isn't it, to people who may have voted Tory in the past, who think, well, the problem with Labour is they're going to spend, and taxes are going to go up, and they're saying, actually, no.
I think that voters recognise that Keir Starmer isn't, say, a Jeremy Corbyn figure. He's not, he's not particularly out there on the left, and people do want things to change. They want to have a genuine choice at the next election, and Keir Starmer seems determined not to give it to them.
But maybe it's just because they're so obsessed with winning, because they're so afraid, actually, still that they won't, despite what everything is suggesting polling-wise. Not that you can ever count on the polls before an election.
Well, no, but there's also a big element which says, do nothing and you're in.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Exactly.
Yeah,
it's a bit of an exciting. It's a bit of an open goal situation.
No, but it is an open goal. If they do anything too radical that spooks anyone, that's what could scupper them. We're a bit tight this hour, so let's have something a bit light, should we? Nikki, let's have a look at this video. Big Brother, which is back. But anyway, one of the housemates, Yin Run, she's from Shanghai. She's never had a crisp sandwich, and she had one, and this is what happened.
This is amazing. God, who invited this?
What?
Who invited this?
Come on.
It is a common way to eat it.
No.
No.
It would be like. It would be like if you.
Like me. No.
If you're like very lazy.
Yeah.
It's like if you were very lazy, you would eat it. Are you sure?
What did you put it in?
You're cooking. Thank you.
Butter.
I won't be doing it again. Bread. Well done. How is it, you know?
Lovely.
Cheese and onion crisps, those, Nikki, apparently?
Yeah, that's a bit of a controversial choice, if you ask me. I don't love cheese and onion. I just like a plain crisp sandwich with lots of butter. Also, you know, crinkle crisps, Seabrooks, not that we're not meant to plug brands, but they're a Yorkshire brand of crisps, which I'm particularly fond of.
Yeah. I love the fact that in the blurb it says she fell in love with the British dish.
This culinary wonder.
I wouldn't go that far.
Well, I mean, she even said, who invented this?
Yeah.
You know, some Michelin-starred chef come up with this great recipe.
It's a guilty pleasure rather than a British dish, isn't it? Mind you, you had
I had a chip butty.
The other day.
On Friday night.
And you're still feeling guilty?
Oh, yeah, it was so nice. I haven't had one of those for years. It was amazing.
I don't know why putting something like that between two bits of bread would taste so brilliant, but they actually do.
They do. It's weird, isn't it? What they need, then, is to give it the King's seal of approval.
Oh, very good. So people may or may not be aware, but when the Queen died, all of the royal warrants for various companies expired. So, you know, you see the seal on these posh brands like Burberry and things like that.
And HP Sauce.
And HP Sauce, people recognise. I didn't realise that... I learnt today from the Mirror that even Coca-Cola has the royal seal of approval, or did under the Queen. I didn't know she was a fan. But essentially, that now these firms all have to reapply, and because we know King Charles is a bit of an eco-zealot, he's demanding that they meet certain green targets, you know, to do with sustainability, how they manage their land, and lots of fashion companies in particular really are not very green. Burberry, for instance, had to burn a whole load of its stock.
Oh, they did, didn't they?
Years ago. Yeah. The King is throwing his weight around, making sure that companies do these sort of sustainable things to meet his approval. Now, you can actually get better sales often with these royal warrants. I think that counts more in the more prestigious end. I don't think...
International markets,
maybe international markets. I'm not sure, I'm not sure that Coke really needed the royal warrant to sell.
We don't really notice... I don't think we notice it over here, but it's quite nice to see.
Yeah, I guess it is. And it's good for smaller brands as well.
Yeah.
They're kind of coming up to get that.
But weren't we told at one point that Highgrove, obviously Prince Charles's, now King Charles's home, was actually making their own ketchup? We never got to taste it.
No, we didn't.
I've gone online and tried to find it, and they obviously haven't had a great success with producing it.
He's given himself a royal warrant.
Well, that would be a bit of
Well, we shall have to see. Look,
crisp sandwich.
Yes, but we'll squeeze in more time next hour. I can promise you that. Nikki Fraser, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Let's find out how the weather's doing.
Hello there, very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. There is a lot of fine weather around throughout the second half of the weekend, and that is thanks to high pressure that is with us across the UK, helping to keep things relatively settled. We do still have some showers to watch out for, primarily across northern areas of Scotland. It will be a cloudier day here as they push their way through. Might see a few showers fringing eastern coastal areas of East Anglia as well. There will just be a bit of a breeze in the east and the north, but elsewhere light winds, a lot of sunshine to be had and staying largely dry as well. You may still need a layer though as you head outside. Temperatures not going to be much higher than 9 to 13 degrees Celsius for all of us. Those fine conditions hold on as we head into this evening and overnight. Again, any showers tending to move their way back towards coastal districts, and a lot of dry weather to be had across the board, really. A few mist and fog patches forming overnight, particularly towards dawn tomorrow morning. And again, it is going to be another cold night for 3 degrees Celsius in towns and cities, certainly dropping below freezing levels for rural areas. A frosty start to Monday morning. Will be a bit more cloud around on Monday compared to recent days, so the sunshine a bit hazier in places. Breezier for the far southwest as well, the winds picking up here again. Showers likely to be limited to the far southeast as well as the far north of Scotland. Temperatures relatively similar to the days before, 9 to 13 degrees Celsius. High pressure holds on into the middle part of next week, but we could potentially see something a little bit more unsettled later on. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Yes.
Going to be crisp and cold.
Deep and crisp and even.
Oh, I hope it's not going to be that cold. Not yet, anyway. Right, well, do stay with us, because obviously we're going to bring you up to date with all of the news from Tel Aviv, for instance, in Israel. We'll be bringing you everything and all the latest from the Israel-Hamas war. That's coming up next. You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's coming up to 10 o'clock in the Middle East, and the people of Gaza await their fate as Israel announces it is preparing for a comprehensive offensive by land, air and sea. Morning to you, very nearly 8 o'clock in the UK on Sunday, the 15th of October. Today.
As the spiral of violence between Israel and Hamas continues, tensions now spread across the world, including to the streets of London. Our reporter Charlie Peters is live on the ground in Tel Aviv, and we'll be bringing you the latest throughout the programme.
As the IDF prepares for that ground invasion of the Gaza Strip, it opens a new humanitarian corridor just now.
Well, we all know what food banks are, but as vulnerable households across the UK struggle to afford heating bills, thousands of warm banks are now in operation. We've been to one, and we'll tell you what they're all about very shortly.
And Cummings isn't the secret Prime Minister, it's Carrie. That's just one of the treasure trove pandemic-era WhatsApps sent by the head of the civil service, who is now probably going to be quizzed by the COVID inquiry. We'll have more on that and the rest of today's headlines later on in the programme.
Also coming up for you, Jonathan's got the weather.
It's a chilly but sunny start to Sunday for many of us. Will that sunshine prevail throughout the rest of today? Join me for the full forecast later to find out.
And Aidan McGee is here with your sport.
Yes, good morning. At the Rugby World Cup, there was heartache for Ireland and Wales in France as England prepare for their quarter-final against Fiji this evening. And in football, we'll have a Manchester United takeover update.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, it has been more than a week now since the Hamas terror attack on Israel that killed 1,300 people. Since then, 2,200 have been killed in Israel's retaliatory bombing campaign.
Thousands of Palestinian civilians in Gaza continue to flee to the southern half of the Strip after Israel's order for over 1 million of them to flee that way. Even hospitals have been told to evacuate, and that's a move the World Health Organization says is tantamount to a death sentence.
Well, the people of Gaza now await their fate after Israel announced it's gearing up for a comprehensive offensive involving air, sea and land. The IDF statement added soldiers will have a strong emphasis on a substantial ground operation.
Meanwhile, the leader of Hamas is believed to have met Iran's foreign minister at a meeting in Qatar, where they agreed to continue cooperation against what they call Israel's occupation of Palestinian territory.
Well, reaction to that escalation has come from all corners. The UN Relief Agency says Gaza is being pushed into an abyss. They've said it's the worst situation they've ever seen. Russia, meanwhile, has asked the UN Security Council to vote on a draft resolution for an immediate ceasefire. That vote's expected tomorrow afternoon.
Well, our reporter Charlie Peters is on the ground in Tel Aviv and joins us live now. Do give us an update on what's going on there.
So, in the last few moments, the IDF has announced that it is opening a new safe humanitarian corridor between 10 a.m. local time and 1 p.m. So a new 3-hour window for people in the Gaza Strip to head south of the Wadi Gaza. This comes just over 48 hours after they first, through UN liaison officers, called on everyone in the north to leave ahead of that imminent invasion. This is now the second extension they've given to that order, I think clearly recognising that the number of people heading south is not sufficient for them to launch that ground operation. Last night, the IDF's chief spokesperson on the military situation said that hundreds of thousands had fled, but would not give us a clear number on how many were remaining and how many had reached the Wadi Gaza. This also comes at a time when reports of destruction of convoys, some 70 dead in a convoy that exploded yesterday morning coming through, and also another explosion killing around a dozen yesterday on one of those corridors heading south. We can't verify who conducted those strikes, and in the last moments, the IDF said that it was not responsible for the 70 dead that Hamas claimed was the cause of an Israeli airstrike. But a very tense humanitarian situation in Gaza as that imminent invasion grows, and also as insufficient numbers head south. The UN says the situation there is untenable. And we've also heard from one of the main hospitals in North Gaza saying that they fear that they could be bombed in any upcoming invasion, because we know that the IDF is keen to use more severe munitions on the ground. They want to be using the bunker buster munitions that they deploy to remove Hamas from those subterranean tunnels where they take shelter, where they prepare attacks, and where they could launch surprise attacks on any IDF invading force.
Charlie, what do we know about the humanitarian corridors? I mean, are they passing through Israeli territory? Or, because the concern seems to be, the issue seems to be that Hamas is actually blocking Palestinian civilians from heading south.
Yes, information coming out of Gaza is fraught with propaganda and uncertainty, both sides claiming that the other is either killing or preventing the movement of internally displaced people in the Gaza Strip. The reports of blockades released from satellite imagery have yet to be verified, but the IDF is claiming that that is what is going on. Last night, the spokesperson said that they had blocked one of the two main supply routes. There are just two supply routes heading south from North Gaza. But at the same time, there have been those reports of explosions, and people who specialise in verifying this information this morning claiming that one of the explosions on one of the convoys that was destroyed yesterday could have come from a gas canister on the truck. We saw in a slowed down version of the video this morning that there was no incoming projectile hitting the truck. And so the situation on the ground extremely unclear, but demonstrably extremely dangerous. People are suffering to a grave extent, and it's not clear how many of the 1.1 million they want to flee south have fled south. But the IDF has said in these safe corridors that they're extending this morning that they just won't conduct any operational targeting within that stretch along those two routes, so that even if there are reports of Hamas military capabilities gathering in those areas, they will not target them. And we do know that Hamas like to blend in with the civilian population. They rely on civilians as human shields to conduct their assaults on Israeli territory and also to prevent them being struck after they launch rocket attacks into the region. So a very murky, very dangerous situation for civilians as they move south.
Yeah, what do we know of the geography for them as they move south? I mean, most of Gaza's roads are very long and flat, but of course by now they're covered in rubble, so it'll be very difficult for certain sort of vehicles to get through. And when they get to Wadi Gaza, I mean, most of us understand that it's a waterway, isn't it? So, I mean, is there just one bridge crossing it to safety, or what? Do we know?
So one of those explosions yesterday reported was on one of those bridges. So yes, definitely obstacles preventing that crossing there and limiting the freedom of manoeuvre for civilians as they move down. But also many people just don't have the capability to get into vehicles or convoys of any sort. One of the reasons why that convoy of 70 that Hamas said was killed, that was destroyed in an Israeli airstrike yesterday, was moving south was because civilians are just taking any opportunity they can to get out of Gaza. We've seen photos over the last 48 hours of people fleeing just on their feet, just taking all of their possessions on their backs. people stuffing their basic supplies, their clothing, everything they might need in a refugee camp, just in bin bags, as doing everything they can to get out of North Gaza ahead of what the IDF describes as a battle zone. That is what they are going to turn North Gaza into. But those supply routes, the two of them, certainly fraught with danger, even as the Israeli Defense Forces describe them as humanitarian corridors, because, of course, it is in the Hamas tactics and their procedures to use civilians as part of their war effort, and so blockades are likely, as is the blending in of Hamas military targets within those civilian corridors heading south.
The rhetoric, Charlie, from Israel has been extremely strong, understandably so. But there's going to be pressure growing, as there always is, but perhaps more so in this case, as to what is going to be a proportionate response from Israel.
Yes, and every single press briefing that we are attending, the IDF are reminding us of what happened last Saturday. Excuse me. They are reminding reporters of the violence, the depravity, as they say, the ISIS-style butchery that took place in the kibbutzim in the south of Israel, and saying that there is only one proportionate response to this kind of terrorist violence, with 1,500 people killed in the south of Israel, and that is the total destruction of Hamas military capabilities. But there is growing global and particularly Western concern that as the IDF moves into that next offensive phase, as it seeks to destroy those Hamas military capabilities, that it will be doing so while hundreds of thousands of civilians remain. I think it's really important to remember that the IDF cannot confirm how many civilians remain in the north. They will not put a number on it. They just say hundreds of thousands have fled, but there are expected to be 1.1 million people there as late as just 2 days ago. Hospitals are still full. People are still taking shelter in North Gaza. And while just a few dozen attacks occurred on the Gaza Strip last night, that is an indicator that more is coming, the quiet before the storm. So it's highly likely that more severe munitions and the most severe bombing campaign that we've seen since this war started will be coming up in the coming days.
And meanwhile, I guess as most Israelis are completely concerned with what is presently happening, are there any questions that anyone is putting politically maybe or militarily to the government about why this was allowed to happen in the first place, about why Israeli intelligence wasn't better than they were and didn't see anything coming?
Yes, well, 4 days ago, Lieutenant General Herzi Hargevi, the IDF's chief of staff, conceded that there had been a grave intelligence and security failure. It was the first time that the IDF conceded that failure. And there have also started to be protests here in Tel Aviv against the government's handling of the situation. Last night, a few hundred gathering outside the Ministry of Defense here to protest against Benjamin Netanyahu's government and its handling of the situation. He poses himself as Mr. Security, but of course, that personal branding has taken a significant dampening since Saturday. But they were also protesting against the way that the government has handled the hostage situation. As we know, over 100 people held in the Gaza Strip, and Israelis desperately want answers on how the government and the military are going to retract them. As it stands, the IDF are offering very limited information on the strategy to achieve that, but they do say it is a top priority.
There's always got to be, in war, a long-term strategy, or at least there always should be. It's often forgotten. Sometimes they call it an exit strategy, don't they, in some conflicts. With this situation, there's got to be a question, hasn't there? Even if they got everyone out of the north of the Gaza Strip and then went in, it's what do those civilians go back to? And that's going to be a significant problem, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely, and I think that's also part of the reason why we did not see the Rafah crossing opening between the south of Gaza and Egypt yesterday, as it's understood that Egypt does not want Palestinians to leave the territory because once they're out, they fear they'll never return. There are concerns that Israel will now, after grave destruction of the Gaza Strip, possibly limit the return of civilians for many, many months. And also this concern comes on what the future of the war will be like as there is a raised threat from the north. Last night we saw a return of rocket and artillery fire across from Syria, the first indirect fire for some 72 hours, but also a surge in activity from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon as anti-tank guided missiles and rockets were fired onto IDF positions in the north. Israel has sent hundreds of thousands of reservists north as last night in Qatar, the head of Hamas, its political leader, met with Iran's foreign minister in a very public show of support between the Iranian regime and Hamas, as it's likely that Iranian proxies will step up their efforts to support the attacks on Israel at this very grave existential threat to the nation.
And meanwhile, before we leave you, Charlie, then, just to upsum, you said that the IDF had just told you that they would extend a sort of humanitarian corridor window, if you like, for some 3 hours, but that's all.
That's it, just 3 hours, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. The clock is ticking. 10 minutes of that have already passed, and people will have to react very suddenly to keep moving south. I imagine that they have launched this new statement on the humanitarian corridor, released in Arabic, because people will be starting that journey and then reconsidering amid blockades and reports of death and destruction on the road south. They need to do all they can to enforce people moving south before they launch that next operation. And I think it does show some degree of restraint by the IDF. They know that they cannot strike North Gaza while so many civilians remain, because international support for their operation will dwindle extremely rapidly.
OK, Charlie, thanks very much indeed. We'll speak to you later on. Well, yesterday, thousands descended on London for a huge pro-Palestinian rally, including the former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn.
The protest was largely peaceful, but with viral social media videos of some attendees appearing to express support for Hamas, opinion is now very much divided on how the police should deal with these sorts of protests.
Well, our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, is here. I mean, you were there yesterday. I mean, what was the mood like?
It was largely peaceful. I should say I was there from about 11 o'clock in the morning to about 3:30 in the afternoon. There were ultimately about 15 arrests, but a lot of those followed later in the day, into the evening in Trafalgar Square. There were some altercations with police, but by and large, it was a very mixed group of pretty peaceful protesters on the whole. Old people, young people, babies in buggies, dogs. But, of course, there are always some who are taking a more extreme view. Now, the police were very clear talking to them what was and was not acceptable. I think a lot of the arrests were to do with people had been told that they were not to obscure their face. I did see them talking to one woman that just you could see her eyes and insisting that was removed. They also had legal advisors on hand, basically to police the police, to make sure that the police were acting properly, and if people were arrested, to tell them their rights. So we have been very, very tolerant in this country of this sort of protest. Of course, there's been protests in Manchester, in Liverpool, Edinburgh, all across the country and all across the world. But other countries have been much less tolerant. France, Germany banned pro-Palestinian protests altogether, though in France people did gather anyway, and I think tear gas was used. But very difficult. The majority, people talking to me just saying, how do you think it feels to have no home? A Palestinian lady who now lives in the UK saying, we have no home, how does that feel? But then, of course, you see those images that have gone viral, the front page of the Daily Mail, girls wearing cutout images of paratroopers. And we know that Hamas, some of them came into Israel by parachute to commit those atrocities. So certainly a pro-Hamas element, but that would say much in the minority.
But actually, if you look at the video, I mean, the thousands of people who were there, only 13 arrests, did you say?
It's not many, is it?
That's not many, actually,
no.
I would have expected it to be worse, actually. I'm very, very pleased that it wasn't.
How is it possible to gauge, because this is, as you said, the fact that police are being policed, although it shows just how delicate this all is. I mean, were a lot of people there being pro-Palestinian but not anti-Israeli? Because it's an important distinction, isn't it?
This is the problem, isn't it? And it's an absolute minefield. Where does concern for innocent Palestinian civilians in Gaza and their right to live in peace, where does that tip? And concerns about how Israel's response may or may not be proportionate, when does that tip into anti-Israeli sentiment? I was talking on a very different scale at Labour Party conference. These pro-Palestinian voices outside the secure zone, very much on the fringe. As a Labour staffer said to me, can you imagine if Jeremy Corbyn, who was at the rally yesterday, had still have been in charge? They'd have been in the hall waving their flags. I think it's a measure of how far Labour have come. But it's a very fine line, isn't it? And talking to a man there who'd begun by saying, this is absolutely horrendous what's happening, he then went immediately into, but basically Palestinians have had such a terrible deal, they've been treated appallingly, they're in an open-air prison, etc., etc. And in the end, I said to him, you basically sound like you're saying Israel have brought this on themselves. And he was like, yeah, exactly. So it's very difficult.
But, you know, it's interesting because there are a lot of news websites around at the moment, I mean, proper ones, where you start to think, how was this allowed to happen in the first place? I don't mean the attack, the recent attack. I mean the whole history of that part of the world. And you start to try and figure out how it was chaotically set up and then gave rise to terrible conflict. And you wonder how it will ever end, ever.
You do, and it's not just to, you know, Israel being created in 1948 officially and the British involvement, and it goes back hundreds, indeed thousands of years. This is a part of the world where there's always been shifting patterns, people in charge, different communities in conflict with each other, and it felt up until just over a week ago that things were a bit more settled, a bit more peaceful. There'd been a focus, I mean, under Donald Trump, the Abraham Accords focusing on trade, relations with other neighbouring states. But it feels like Hamas last Saturday made a decision to blow all of that up. Yeah. And it feels like people in the Middle East, whether they're in Israel or Gaza, are now in a significantly worse position than they've been for a long time. And I think worth noting, of course, that the death count on the Israeli side, the highest since the Holocaust in the Second World War.
Yeah. And it's interesting, you're seeing that gentleman you were talking to saying, ultimately, well, Israel have brought this upon themselves. But you've got, there is an element where some people may look at that and think, yeah, well, maybe there's a point there. But that ignores then, doesn't it, the fact that, which I think is easy to forget if you're not Jewish, that Israel has been under, its very existence has been under threat, you know, surrounded by countries who say you should not exist. And not only that the state shouldn't exist, that Jewish people shouldn't exist. And we almost forget about that existential threat that they've faced as well for decades and decades and decades.
Yes, and some people chanting at the march, free, free Palestine, from the river to the sea, Palestine. Now, that's effectively getting rid of
Israel.
Yeah, and I mean, Israel does not have very many friends in the region, Iran being top of the list of people that wish it
surrounded by
very, very ill. And also worth saying that the people of Gaza don't have many friends either, because I think Hamas are certainly not their friends. They don't really care how many they use to shield them. And also Egypt seem to have no intention. That's their only way out, because on one side they've got the sea, on two sides they've got Israel. You know, they are trapped, and Egypt seemed to have no intention of letting them out. You've said that a few
but there could well be Hamas amongst them if they let them out, couldn't
well,
there?
This is it.
As we've heard from Charlie earlier.
OK, Catherine, for now, thank you very much indeed. I mean, you must be exhausted at home, trying to work it all out. I mean, I imagine you've all got thoughts as to the rights and wrongs and the ways forward and all the rest of it. What I always come back to on this, I think, is that if there was who doesn't want peace ultimately? And if there was an easy answer, it would have been found a very long time ago.
I think there are some people in the world who don't want peace.
Well, yes, yes.
I think we've just seen an example of it.
But the vast majority of people
Of course,
want peace.
yes.
And you look at a situation like this, and you just don't know which way to turn, do you? It is just tragedy on all sides. Awful. It's just absolutely awful.
We will be bringing you other matters to talk about, though, in the programme, so do continue watching. You're watching Breakfast, of course, on GB News, and you'll want to know what our weather is going to be like.
Hello there, very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. There is a lot of fine weather around throughout the second half of the weekend, and that is thanks to high pressure that is with us across the UK, helping to keep things relatively settled. We do still have some showers to watch out for, primarily across northern areas of Scotland. It will be a cloudier day here as they push their way through. Might see a few showers fringing eastern coastal areas of East Anglia as well. There will just be a bit of a breeze in the east and the north, but elsewhere light winds, a lot of sunshine to be had and staying largely dry as well. You may still need a layer though as you head outside. Temperatures not going to be much higher than 9 to 13 degrees Celsius for all of us. Those fine conditions hold on as we head into this evening and overnight. Again, any showers tending to move their way back towards coastal districts, and a lot of dry weather to be had across the board, really. A few mist and fog patches forming overnight, particularly towards dawn tomorrow morning. And again, it is going to be another cold night for 3 degrees Celsius in towns and cities, certainly dropping below freezing levels for rural areas. A frosty start to Monday morning. Will be a bit more cloud around on Monday compared to recent days, so the sunshine a bit hazier in places. Breezier for the far southwest as well, the winds picking up here again. Showers likely to be limited to the far southeast as well as the far north of Scotland. Temperatures relatively similar to the days before, 9 to 13 degrees Celsius. High pressure holds on into the middle part of next week, but we could potentially see something a little bit more unsettled later on. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Oh, Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. We're going to be talking boxing very shortly. Tommy Fury, who you may well have heard of, defeating KSI, who you probably never heard of.
No, I didn't.
But Aidan will explain all very shortly.
Oh, goodness.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
It is 8:29. Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
And now we're going to find out who Tommy Fury and KSI are. Aidan McGee will explain.
So this was a boxing match that took place last night. Massive fanfare around it. KSI is a YouTuber. Tommy Fury is officially a boxer, but nobody knew who he was prior to 2019 when, of course, he was in Love Island and he picked up their relationship on the island with Molly May. They've subsequently become married and become a big brand. So Tommy Fury, as I say, he's regarded as a proper boxer, but we wouldn't consider this to be proper boxing.
High-level boxing.
No, you wouldn't.
Misfits.
Yeah, they're the kind of organisation that, don't get me wrong, they're very adept at making money. And maybe people, because boxing has created this problem itself by not getting the fights on that people want to see, by having beset by drug issues in the last 2 years or so. And so people are probably seeking something alternative to the real thing, and they're saying, well, actually, this is good fun.
So it's just like an event, almost, rather than a serious boxing.
It is. I mean, look, they're not completely without capability, but there were 2 fights last night. I mean, the Logan Paul and Dylan Davis one was on the undercard. I mean, that ended with a choker hold because one of them is a WWE wrestler, and security had to get in, and that's dangerous.
So you're not allowed to do that in boxing.
No, you're not at all. This is what I mean. So,
Was that a chokehold round Logan Paul?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Well,
and so
I don't know if I'd have stepped in.
It was. Well, that's the point. It was broken up because of that. But if that's meant to be a boxing match, then that's quite a dangerous thing to do. And then following up from that, we had KSI against Tommy Fury. Now, what's interesting to me is the boxing media's reaction to this. I mean, there's some highly respected boxing people who Stephen and I both know. And they're taking this really seriously. And I wonder because they fear, longer term, this is where the bandwagon is heading. And they want to be on that. They want to be on that
Was there
bus.
a big audience there?
20,000 all sell out of the AO Arena in Manchester.
The crowds, then?
Without question. I think they could have sold it.
Sold 1 million tickets for the pay-per-view.
They did indeed. DAZN don't make much money. I think this might be the only event of the year they make some money out of. And I think they could have sold the arena out 3 times over. And I worry that with boxing the way it is and the problems it's had in the last 18 months, maybe the reaction of the boxing media might be quite telling, because if they're following this, they probably think that's where the future is. And I don't know what that says for the sport. I really don't.
Yeah, but if people, it's down to the line. If this is what people want to watch, people want to be they want to be entertained, and
Yes,
that's with these celebrities.
Well, I mean, look, we mentioned WWE. I mean, we all know it's fake. We all know it's set up. It's fun. It's world wrestling entertainment, not rather than sport for a reason. People watch it wherever it goes around the world. People turn up and they see it. So maybe it's a good glimpse into the future, perhaps, then.
Maybe.
Well, you've got to pull a crowd or you don't make any money, and money is what it tends to be all about.
True. Let's glimpse to the future this afternoon, should we? 4 o'clock, England versus Fiji, quarter-finals Rugby World Cup.
In Marseille, absolutely, in front of the Princess of Wales as well. She's going to be down there watching England, cheering them on.
She'll be there with a pint and a pie, won't she?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd have thought so, yeah. I'd have thought so. No, do rugby fans do that? Yeah, they do a bit, don't they?
Oh, I have to have a pint.
Yeah, I think so.
I'd love to see...
Well, don't France, it's a litre. It's a half a litre, I think. That's what you get.
Oh, well, that's not good.
The metric system. Anyway, England are underway, 4 o'clock this afternoon. Now, where are England right now? Are they struggling? Are they the team that's been beset with issues since the turn of the year, since Steve Borthwick came in? Are they low on morale? Or have they won 4 matches in the group stages against Argentina, Japan, Chile, Samoa? I'd only say the first of those fixtures was actually a decent result. The one since then, It's hard to know. It's a very, very easy pool. We consider the pool that Ireland and Wales came through. It was much easier for England when they got through there. So they've faced Fiji today. Fiji beat them at Twickenham comprehensively in August. And even though it's going to be a tough game, that's quite a kind draw to have in the quarter-final. With England's pedigree, if they get through that today, and it's a huge opportunity to do so, Stephen, if they get into the semi-final, England have got to finals before without playing well. And I just wonder, if you're one of those teams who are expected to win in the semi-final stage, do you really want to be facing somebody like England, which is a proper rugby nation?
Yeah, but if they do get through, they're going to face who, France or South Africa?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know. Well, yeah, not just France. I mean, France are in the home nation as well, and they've never won the tournament before. They're kind of where England were 20 years ago. And in fact, Ireland lost there yesterday, and Wales. I mean, they're two sides that have beaten England quite comprehensively recently. So England looked quite lucky so far.
When does it all end?
It's
just been going on forever, hasn't
Well, it has. I think it goes on too long. You have recovery, don't you? It's a very physical game, so you need at least a week. But there were two weeks between England's two matches in the pool stages, and I think it's just too long. There's no momentum building, is there? So it finishes on the 28th of October. We hope England will be there, but it's difficult to know when they've played low-grading opposition. Then it's hard to know. Having said that, they beat Argentina in the first game. Argentina beat Wales yesterday in the semi-final. It's not all about your world ranking. It's about who turns up on the day. We found that last night with Ireland and New Zealand, of course.
Yeah. All right, Aidan, thank you very much indeed. We'll catch you a little bit later on.
Sort of understatement, that is. It's all about who turns up on the day. But anyway, we're going to be looking at the headline makers next, and still to come, one of the things they're going to be talking about is Cummings isn't the secret Prime Minister, it's Carrie. It's those WhatsApp messages that now we know what they were saying to each other inside number 10.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 8:38. Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
And we're going to go through some of the stories in the newspapers today with the deputy editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, and author and broadcaster, Nikki Hodgson. Sorry, I had a cup of coffee a minute ago.
Very hot.
Too hot.
Very, very hot. Look, Fraser, let's start. We've got a video of this actually, which is horrifying. Actually, a Star of David graffitied on the doors of several homes in Berlin.
So this is the very, very chilling return of the world's oldest hatred, and it will resonate with people a lot more as it's happening in Germany, famously the perpetrators of the worst anti-Semitic atrocity of all time. Germany has actually had a bit of a lingering anti-Semitism problem in recent years. People may recall a couple of years ago what an advisor to the government told Jewish people not to wear their kippahs in certain places. Anti-Semitic attacks have been on the rise in general, and now, following the atrocities in Israel committed by Hamas, it seems as if it's now sort of spiralling out of control. There's been at least 4 cases of people's houses being spray-painted with stars of David, letting people know that Jewish people live in these apartments. The authorities have warned that there could be terror attacks inspired by Hamas on Jewish buildings. So really, there's a problem that we have to get to grips with here. We are seeing the return of something very nasty and very dangerous.
It's just so devastating. I mean, I've been hearing reports this week of people taking down the misusers, that you have on a door frame that has the Torah scroll in that is... I mean, it's part of your faith to sort of touch it and to remind yourself of God, basically, when you come in and leave your home. But people are taking them down for their own safety in North
there
London.
Are several Jewish faith schools in Britain now that are closed, and those that are open are telling their youngsters to not to wear their blazers because their blazers have the Star of David on them.
It's so upsetting.
It should go back to that. They should it.
Do you remember years ago seeing a clip of Jerry Springer saying that his father, because they were evacuees, his father's generation were evacuees, and he always had an old van in the garage that he always checked worked, always had fuel in it, and was lots in case they ever needed to run.
Oh, God.
And you remember thinking, this is 20-odd years ago, and thinking, oh, God, isn't that awful that he's still living with that horror? And now you can see why.
I don't think you ever get over something like that.
No.
And you pass it on to other generations when things like this happen. It becomes part of, your makeup to worry that much.
Well, and you have to think there are youngsters on both sides of the conflict at the moment who will never forget what's happening to them now. Never.
OK, let's move on to The Observer, should we? It was in the papers yesterday that Carrie was the real Prime Minister when Boris was in charge. Some people thought it was Dominic Cummings, but no, it wasn't. The man who... This was all in WhatsApp messages that have been released. Simon Case...
Chief Civil Servant.
Chief Civil Servant. He's going to have to answer questions on this now.
Yes, he is, but, it's the gift that keeps on giving, isn't it? Basically, Simon Case has said that, he described the government as a tragic joke back in the day during the pandemic on WhatsApp, and apparently he's going to be questioned further over a so-called treasure trove of messages, which also reveal more about the machinations of Number 10. So he's, there are several messages with him saying that, Boris Johnson's wife, Carrie, appeared to be the real person in charge of the government, and another message saying, I was always told that Dom, as in Dominic Cummings, was the secret PM. How wrong they are. I look forward to telling Select Committee tomorrow. Don't worry about Dom. The real person in charge is Carrie. So, it's very, very damning. And, I guess part of the problem is, or maybe part of the reason these messages are being aired. Yes, OK, they've got to be looked at by the committee looking into Partygate, but they also seem like they're going to annihilate Boris Johnson's chance of ever returning in politics.
Yeah.
Because basically, if he wasn't even strong enough to rule as he was elected and he was letting his wife do it, then that's not democracy,
Yeah, but
is
these
it?
nasty, I mean, some would say bitchy messages from Simon Case to others on his WhatsApp group spark of misogyny, don't they?
I think people have said that. I mean, I'd like to call her Carrie Antoinette, I think is...
Yeah.
You know, people have said it's sexist to say that she's really in charge. I think you know, as Nikki said, I think it's more a sign of Boris's...
Yeah, I think it's more about that.
He is so spineless that, you know, people famously say that he is convinced by whoever the last person he spoke to, that's whose advice he's going to listen to. But, I mean, these are allegations, I should say, but Lord Ashcroft wrote a book about Carrie Johnson, and he alleged that sometimes she would literally take his phone, pretend to be the Prime Minister and send out messages. So these are not without merit, these kinds of, you know, accusations.
I don't know. Why do you think
I'm just
misogyny?
uneasy about it because I just think... I mean, in some of his other messages, he says, I just can't cope with this. And you think, well, what sort of a wimp is he? I want to know. I'm more inclined to think the worse of him rather than Carrie.
Is that not misandry?
It might be.
There are
I don't know.
there are some key issues, you know, at the sort of tail end of that government where you could see the Carrie view of the world was winning out, so to speak. I mean, possibly the most infamous incident was in Afghanistan, where you know, the government evacuated dogs and cats ahead of people. Now, Carrie is famously a sort of animal rights activist. That hasn't been attributed directly to her, but a lot of people suspect that she will have played a role in that. There was also rows over how the government should tackle wokeness. Carrie is seen as someone who's particularly woke. Boris isn't, but he still was made to feel uneasy in public about, you know, challenging wokeness in the civil service.
And the gold wallpaper, of course.
The gold wallpaper.
How much was that? £60 a roll or something?
No, more than that.
Wasn't that more like 100?
No.
It was something like £800 a roll or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, OK,
And they had a party with the designer in
That's right, the designer was...
I don't have any, that's me.
OK, let's sticking with politics then, from the old PM to the new. Rishi Sunak, he does... You know, if you like him as a Prime Minister or not, what he can't do is speak in public. He's not a good performer. I've said this time and time again, but he has decided to release another video, which is... I haven't seen it. You two say it's cringe.
We've been laughing our heads off, yeah.
Have we got it? I think we
Yeah, we have. Let's have a look.
Hello, hello. Hello, how are you? I'm Rishi.
Hello.
We'll get some tea in a minute.
How's your 5-point plan going?
Brutally honest, how many of you have picked up that I've got these 5 priorities that I'm trying to focus on?
No, I haven't.
No?
Oh, dear.
No, I have to say, that's not as bad as I thought.
I mean,
you need to watch more of it.
And he has some more... You know, he does have the reverse Midas touch when it comes to talking and communicating to the public. He can come across as a sort of primary school teacher.
Absolutely.
He sort of he speaks slowly, deliberately. He speaks down to people.
It seems very patronising, doesn't it? And also, I just was wondering, where do you get a coffee shop that has posh coffee and the sarsen's vinegar on the table? Because I've never seen that.
And that twiddly music and the open-closed sign.
It's just so forced, exactly.
They appeared to have Wayne Rooney sat in there.
Yes, they did.
I mean, the thing is, you've got to play to your strengths as a leader, right? So if I don't understand what his campaign team are doing, he's not good at being the down-to-earth guy. He isn't that person. He lives a rarefied life. He's got this posh holiday home in California. I mean, he's just, you know, he's very, very rich. And there's something about him that is not down to earth.
So what's he trying to prove in this video? That he gets on down there and talks to ordinary people?
Well, he's trying to make sure that everybody understands the 5 pledges. But the way it's done is just, it's just so shoehorned. It's not organic. You never have a natural conversation like that, would you?
No, but I tell you what, though, I know people were being critical of him. This isn't anything to do with him, is it? This is a team going, oh, PM, this is what we want you to do.
Well, absolutely, that as well. But what are they doing? They're totally out of touch.
Yeah.
He probably got paid a fortune. What did Alistair Campbell think of it?
I mean, he's not a fan. I mean, he said there are, you know, real issues for the Prime Minister to address while he's making glossy videos, but, I mean, he would say that, wouldn't he? You know, Yeah, as Nikki said, this is not to Rishi's strength. I mean, do you remember he used to make all those glossy videos during the pandemic and make all these... People who followed him on social media would see he'd do all these photoshopped images of eat out to help out. You know, it's sort of... He has this sort of, I don't know, Instagram influencer style.
Isn't he also the one that did a bit of talking in the back of a car without a seatbelt on?
Well, yeah, that got him into trouble.
So he's made a few mistakes with his PR company.
It's also a bit like when his wife at the conference said that he was gushingly, they were best friends. It's like, it's just so tonally wrong. It doesn't sit with... I don't think it sits with the voters.
It's just trying too hard.
It is try hard, exactly.
Oh, well. Should we have another video? Because we're sort of video-tastic this time. Nikki, this one's yours. And it's upsetting a lot of people. It's a video from Marc Jacobs, who's a designer, apparently. Oh.
Oh! Is that deliberate? Oh, well, no wonder if she's wearing those shoes. But
oh, so that's upsetting a lot of people,
the model has
is it?
deliberately fallen down the stairs like that as part of a fashion video.
She looks like a terrible actress. That doesn't look convincing at all, does it?
Well, the thing is, I mean, does she have some stunt experience? Because it must really hurt going downstairs like that.
She must.
She's got a little padded suit on underneath the outfit.
What's it trying to say about the suit?
Well, this is what I think. What is it trying to say?
Down the street and you won't show
Yeah, or it's like, get as drunk as you want, wear what shoes you want, wear our clothes, and you won't come out with any injuries or something. I don't know. I'm not saying that she's meant to look drunk in the video, but I just think fashion, if you've got to go somewhere like that with a video, you've run out of ideas.
Yes.
Haven't you?
Yes.
Isn't the fact that your clothes are beautiful, or if they're utilitarian, they're that, or if they're, you know, obviously Marc Jacobs is targeted at a very young audience, even though I've got a bag, I'm way too old for it. But, I mean,
so kids
I don't understand it.
This then, won't
yeah,
they?
and I guess, like, what they're trying to do is imitate this kind of, you know, this style of video that you see on TikTok. But, again, I just think it's try-hard.
Yeah, but come on, the issue is, I mean, I agree with you entirely. What on earth does it prove? But it's gone viral.
Yes.
And
well, maybe that's all they care about.
I saw it scrolling through Instagram the other day, and I just thought someone had fallen over. It didn't make me think, I'm going to go out and buy this designer bag. I mean, I probably wouldn't have bought it anyway. It's $800 for people at home, so don't fall over in it.
No,
I think it would make me think, well, it serves her right for her own...
Just don't wear those shoes, dear.
Yeah. I got a cut price from TK Maxx, just want to say that. Didn't pay the full fee.
No, you never want to pay full price. Well, look, we're talking about it and it's gone viral and that's what they want, so they'll be counting that as a success, won't they?
Well, we've given it airtime.
Yeah, there you go. Meanwhile...
Yeah, well, thank you for throwing this to me. Yeah. The cost of loving, according to the Daily Star.
Loving.
Apparently we are, even though we're suffering from the cost of living crisis, we still want to make love.
Of course we do.
So what do we need when we make love? Condoms. Can't afford them, so nick them. That's what the Daily Star is saying. Fraser, take over.
The Daily Star isn't advising...
Oh, look at the headline. Bonkers. Yeah, very good.
But supermarkets are now having to put condoms in lockboxes because of the shoplifting crisis. People might know that there's been a huge explosion in shoplifting over the past couple of years, and now they're worried that condoms are being stolen as well. The Daily Star describes these people stealing condoms as randy pilferers, which is
very good.
Fantastic tabloid turn of phrase. I think probably what's really happening is it often, people say that, stealing, shoplifting is people being poor. You hear about baby formula and things like that being stolen. Usually, actually, the products that are targeted are things that have a long shelf life. So that's why baby formula is targeted and not other food when things are shoplifted.
So much if condoms have a long shelf life.
Yeah, it's this.
And condoms have a long shelf life. They do expire, so do check if you don't want a nasty surprise. But, they have a long shelf life, so there's something that they have resale value. So gangs and...
Gangs?
Yeah. That's the shoplifting crisis now. It's not people who broke.
But a lot of it is actually orchestrated by gangs.
Going in with wheelie
people go in,
just
steal,
picking everything
and then selling it on.
Well, they're dodgy people on street corners going, do you want something for the weekend?
Yeah.
Well, and, at the moment, if you steal something under £200, it's very unlikely that the police will take action. You're not going to get a conviction. So there is basically a free-for-all.
What is the world coming to?
I have to say that...
There always has been, hasn't it, is what I was going to say.
I just sort of think this is a non-story, because there'll be thousands of people...
It's in the Daily Star.
Yeah, but there'll be thousands of people going, But they've had condoms in lockboxes for years.
Yes, I think that is true.
Yes, they have done.
Well,
years and years and years and years.
The Daily Star front page is about the likelihood of a zombie apocalypse.
In Leeds.
In Leeds, yeah.
This was secondary news.
So you pick your newspaper if you want to. Meanwhile, Nikki, I think we've got just time to tell about this man who lives in Sussex who is in trouble with the Water Authority. They're suing him and he's counter-suing. What's it all about?
Well, I think it's quite smart. Obviously, we've got this water crisis. The state of our water is a mess. The state of our rivers is a mess. And this guy, Mike Deacon, has decided to counter-sue Southern Water. Basically, he's stopped paying his bills. They're taking him to court to get the money. And he's counter-suing them for not actually providing the service and the quality of the water that he requires. And the reason he knows about this is because he monitors pollution, because he's a fisher. So he's been monitoring pollution for 13 years in the River Ouse in Sussex. And he absolutely knows that they've fallen short. I actually quite like this story. I think it's quite a good idea. I mean, it's quite risky doing it, but if you've got the gumption, you might. I mean, I think it's great.
Yeah, because he's not. You see, because he is paying, but he's only paying £1 a month.
Yeah,
so there's got to be a legal thing. That's well, I am paying something.
I think, maybe he's kind of like cleverly circumventing something about stopping payments altogether. But yeah, I mean, it is one way to show that you don't accept the service. And why should you, in a way? If you're not being given the service, why should you pay for it?
Our water companies.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah. Enemies of the people, the water company. It's fair to say.
Oh, well, yeah, they're not doing any of us any favours, and there's just change. It needs to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there you go. Look, it's been really good to see you both this morning.
Thank
you.
Thank you very much indeed. Go and check your expiry dates, both of you.
But I must say, you've done a grand job, because it's very hard to find uplifting stories as well at the moment, isn't it?
It is, and I don't know if the weather's going to uplift you or not. Let's find out from Jonathan.
Hello there, very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. There is a lot of fine weather around throughout the second half of the weekend, and that is thanks to high pressure that is with us across the UK, helping to keep things relatively settled. We do still have some showers to watch out for, primarily across northern areas of Scotland. It will be a cloudier day here as they push their way through. Might see a few showers fringing eastern coastal areas of East Anglia as well. There will just be a bit of a breeze in the east and the north, but elsewhere light winds, a lot of sunshine to be had and staying largely dry as well. You may still need a layer though as you head outside. Temperatures not going to be much higher than 9 to 13 degrees Celsius for all of us. Those fine conditions hold on as we head into this evening and overnight. Again, any showers tending to move their way back towards coastal districts, and a lot of dry weather to be had across the board, really. A few mist and fog patches forming overnight, particularly towards dawn tomorrow morning. And again, it is going to be another cold night for 3 degrees Celsius in towns and cities, certainly dropping below freezing levels for rural areas. A frosty start to Monday morning. Will be a bit more cloud around on Monday compared to recent days, so the sunshine a bit hazier in places. Breezier for the far southwest as well, the winds picking up here again. Showers likely to be limited to the far southeast as well as the far north of Scotland. Temperatures relatively similar to the days before, 9 to 13 degrees Celsius. High pressure holds on into the middle part of next week, but we could potentially see something a little bit more unsettled later on. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Still think it looks very nice behind him, very autumnal. Mind you, we look autumnal here with our oranges.
Morning.
There you go. Hopefully it will be a nice sort of autumn time.
It was lovely yesterday, even though it was a bit cold. Lovely and sunny, where it was anyway.
Going to be colder today, though. I think by all accounts, it looks like it's going to be colder.
Anyway, do stay with us for all the very latest news, of course, on the Israel-Hamas war. We'll have all the latest for you live from Tel Aviv. You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Well, it's coming up to 11 o'clock in the Middle East, and the Foreign Office is telling British citizens in the Gaza Strip to get ready in case the border crossing into Egypt is opened. It's very nearly 9 o'clock in the UK on Sunday, the 15th of October, and these are the stories we've been covering on Breakfast today.
As the people of Gaza await their fate after Israel announces it is preparing for a comprehensive offensive, tensions are now spreading across the world, including to the streets of London. Our reporter Charlie Peters is live on the ground in Tel Aviv and will bring you the latest throughout the programme.
As the situation in the Gaza Strip becomes untenable, Western nations begin to evacuate their civilians from Israel.
Now, everyone's expecting a Trump-Biden rematch, of course, in the American election, but could Americans actually vote for another President Kennedy?
We have a year and 1 month until the election. Let's go take back our country. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
So what are RFK's chances of winning the White House now that he's broken off from the Democrats? We've had expert analysis stateside, and if you missed it, you can catch it on our YouTube channel.
And back at home, we all know what food banks are, but as vulnerable households across the UK struggle to afford their heating bills, thousands of warm banks are now in operation. We've been to visit one. You can find that report too, gbnews.com.
Labour's planning to trim down some key pledges as it tries to keep its manifesto credible as it prepares for power. The head of the civil service, meanwhile, is expected to be quizzed by the COVID inquiry over a treasure trove of WhatsApp messages. Just some of the stories we've looked at in Headline Makers.
And then, of course, Jonathan has your latest weather forecast.
It's a chilly but sunny start to Sunday for many of us. Will that sunshine prevail throughout the rest of today? Join me for the full forecast later to find out.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, let's start with the latest developing news in relation to the Israel-Hamas conflict. And the Foreign Office, the British Foreign Office, is telling UK citizens who are in the Gaza Strip to prepare and be ready. Now, that's just in case the Rafah border, that's the southern border in Gaza, is open. That's currently controlled by Egypt.
And of course, it's now been over a week since the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel that killed 1,300 people. Since then, more than 2,000 have been killed in Israel's retaliatory bombing campaign. Thousands of Palestinian civilians in Gaza continue to try and flee to the southern half of the Strip after Israel's order for over 1 million of them to go there. Even hospitals have been told to evacuate, and that's a move that the World Health Organization has said is tantamount to a death sentence.
Well, the people of Gaza, of course, await their fate after Israel announced it's gearing up for a comprehensive offensive involving air, sea and land. The IDF statement also added that soldiers have a strong emphasis on a substantial ground invasion.
Meanwhile, the leader of Hamas is believed to have met Iran's foreign minister at a meeting in Qatar, where they agreed to continue cooperation against what they call Israel's occupation of Palestinian territory.
Well, reaction to the planned escalation has come from all corners. The UN Relief Agency says Gaza is being pushed into an abyss, calling the situation the worst they've ever seen. Meanwhile, Russia has asked the UN Security Council to vote on a draft resolution for an immediate ceasefire, with a vote expected tomorrow afternoon.
Well, the reaction to the whole conflict is reverberating now around the world, with Jewish communities in the north of England, as well as London here, bearing the brunt of community tensions. Yesterday saw a huge pro-Palestinian rally in London, but opinion is divided on how the police should deal with these things.
Well, let's head to Tel Aviv and our reporter, Charlie Peters. What's the latest, Charlie?
Yes, that significant moment with the Foreign Office calling on all British nationals in Gaza to head to the Rafah crossing with Egypt in case it opens. And whether or not it will open is, of course, the big question in the Gaza Strip in the south for that humanitarian situation, which the UN has described as untenable. Yesterday, we heard reports that after US diplomacy led by Secretary of State Antony Blinken with the Qataris, the Egyptians and the Israelis, that they had secured an opening of that crossing, nothing followed. It remained shut. And photos from the Egyptian side appear to show much of the crossing being blocked off by concrete limits. And so whether or not people will be able to exit the Gaza Strip and head into Egypt remains unclear at this time. But of course, Gaza is under a significant blockade. Several kilometres outside of the border are now limited as a military evacuation zone as Israel prepares for that likely ground invasion. But at the same time, there are concerns throughout central and northern Israel that strikes from Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon may create a new and heightened security situation in the rest of the country. And so Western powers and other countries from around the world are now starting to evacuate their civilians from Israel. In the last 15 minutes, Washington said that it will call on evacuations from the northern port city of Haifa into Cyprus, which is essentially a floating aircraft carrier for many Western powers looking into the Eastern Mediterranean. And that will be an evacuation by sea. Charter flights and military aircraft have been gathering at Tel Aviv International Airport for the last week. Some of those flights have started going out, carrying Western and global civilians away from this conflict as it escalates. There are some 60,000 British nationals in Israel and the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and the Foreign Office is obviously trying to liaise with them as it deals with that declining humanitarian situation and tries to reach out for latest information on the British hostages held in the Gaza Strip.
One senses now that the tension is ratcheting up as other countries react, call for borders to be opened, like you said, maybe even a possible evacuation to Cyprus. It seems as though the panic is spreading, that things are going to happen quite quickly.
Yes, and that situation in the north really is attracting more concern now. In the last 30 minutes, the Israeli Defense Force has extended the military evacuation zone off the southern Lebanese border, and its spokesperson on a press conference with us in the last hour told reporters that it urged the Lebanese state not to get involved, and that if Hezbollah acts in southern Lebanon and starts to strike Israel with greater strength, then it will hold the Lebanese state responsible. Lebanon is a country in political disarray, has been for many years after that appalling Beirut port explosion in 2020, which has allowed many extremist organisations in the country to take in a vacuum of power. And it's understood that Lebanese Hezbollah, with its great capabilities, military support and sustenance from Iran, has enjoyed a greater sense of security and freedom of manoeuvre in Lebanon. So it's had 3 years of staging to prepare for an opportunity like this, an opportunity where the Israelis are preparing to invade the Gaza Strip, but also having to defend itself in the north. We also had shelling and artillery fire from Syria last night, the first in 72 hours, and there are concerns after the Hamas political leadership met with Iran's foreign minister last night. This is a very tense situation, and escalation appears almost likely.
Are we getting a sense of what the Israeli government wants the international community to do here? Because obviously it's very difficult for the international community, but presumably they're not going to stand by if Israel is finding itself stretched to the extent because of what is happening in the northern parts of Israel and these other countries getting involved. They're not going to sit back and do nothing, are they, if push comes to shove?
That's right, and I think that's why the US intervention has been so important since this conflict started. US President Joe Biden warning other countries considering to get involved with this conflict and seeking a bruised and creaking Israel. They're seeking to exploit that situation. He issued a one-word warning: don't. And it was understood at the time that Iran had heard that warning and also seen a physical display of power with a US strike group, a carrier, floating into the East Mediterranean as a display of its forces, and the Americans providing the Israeli side with advanced munitions throughout this week to both replenish the Iron Dome missile defence system, but also to likely provide new offensive munitions as well. This appears to have delayed the Iranian response as they seek to possibly exploit the situation as Israel tries to launch that ground offensive into the Gaza Strip.
How could those other terrorist organisations join in and support Hamas? In what way are they likely to do it?
Well, the Hamas military capabilities, we've seen what they can do over the last week, but Lebanese Hezbollah have greater supplies, greater manpower, and more capabilities from southern Lebanon. They have long-range missiles supplied readily by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the asymmetric special units of the Iranian military, and of course we also know that Iranian proxies operate with great freedom in Syria on that border with Israel. We also know that Palestinian Islamic Jihad could further engage in this conflict with more shelling, more artillery. I think the most devastating thing that these other groups could do towards the Israeli state is just to threaten with missiles and rockets, to overwhelm the Iron Dome defence system here. I think it's unlikely that we'll see people crossing the border from southern Lebanon into northern Israel, as the defences of those borders in terms of manpower are extreme. The Israelis can decimate people who attempt to cross that border, and it's unlikely they'll be able to overwhelm in that way. But we have seen successful rocket attacks from Hamas in the last 24 hours, rockets landing in Sderot in the south, Ashkelon further north, and here in Tel Aviv, where there was impact last night, just a few miles south of our location. A huge explosion as a missile crashed into a motorway. But as that situation becomes more precarious, there is concern in Israel that Lebanese Hezbollah will launch missiles that could overwhelm the IDF from both angles and prevent a situation where the Iron Dome can intercept all of them, possibly inflicting severe civilian casualties on the Israeli side.
OK. Charlie, for now, thank you very much indeed. Let's talk to Miri Eisin, who's also in Tel Aviv, who's a retired colonel in the IDF and also former Israeli government spokesperson, beg your pardon. We're good to see you this morning. There is as much sympathy as there is with Israel, and there is a lot internationally, and particularly from countries like the UK and the US, there is also a concern as we await this huge movement now as to whether this is going to be a proportionate response from Israel.
Stephen, Anne, when I look at you right now, it's as if I'm in an alternative reality. First of all, you can go and study, if somebody is suddenly a lawyer, that our response is the most proportionate response ever. We have been giving early warning, 24 hours, 72 hours into every one of these different places and telling the Palestinian people who are being held as human shields by the Hamas terrorists, we're telling them move. You're talking about the movement. I didn't see Hamas terrorists saying, hi, we're going to come butcher 30 different Israeli communities and take them hostages into the state of Israel, butcher, torture, mutilate, and they're holding our hostages. And we have been giving that warning. Does it make it easy? Does it make it nice? It's absolutely proportionate and trying as much as possible to save the Palestinian people from the Hamas leadership that are holding them hostage. It isn't as simple as that. They're not just being held hostage by Hamas, but yet we are giving them that warning. It doesn't make it beautiful. It doesn't make it nice, but it is most definitely proportionate.
Well, I was going to say, it may not be beautiful or nice, but is it realistic? Because it seems a very short period of time to ask for 1.1 million people to walk south.
They've been told that already on Wednesday. You kind of talked about it a bit. They've been told again on Thursday. We're already on Sunday. This is something where it isn't that Israel is gung-ho going out and doing it. We also are aware. We have no intent and desire in any way to hurt that civilian population. Hundreds of thousands of people have already moved. I think that you also should be showing the Hamas barricades trying to stop the people in the Gaza Strip from going south, that they have been inventing fake news where they've been exploding things and saying that Israel is attacking these people going south, that they are telling the people there, don't go south, this is all an Israeli bluff. As I said, not easy, not nice. We're in the worst war that has ever been. And this war, I say sadly, is in its own way on your streets. My heart goes out to Palestinian people. My heart goes out to Lebanese people. Hamas is a horrific terror organization. Hezbollah is a terrific terror organization. And we cannot allow those terror organizations to be in any way the representative or the voice of the Palestinian or Lebanese people, because that tension up north is something that impacts what's going on here as well.
What happens after? Is there going to be a long-term strategy here, Miri? In the sense that even if the north of the Gaza Strip was completely freed of civilians and the IDF goes in and is successful, what do those people go back to?
Stephen and Anne, I'm with you, and I understand what we're talking about when we're talking not just to a British audience, but to an Israeli audience. This is about right now something that I say sadly, and I hate being this prophetess of doom. I've never been this way before. But what Hamas brought into the heart of the state of Israel, a terror organization like Hamas or Hezbollah can bring to any place. This isn't about the very clear-cut Palestinian issue that my heart goes out to. Peace operatives inside the area of Israel were kidnapped as hostages and are being brutally hurt inside there. This is not about that. So when you ask about the future of the Gaza Strip, yes, there is an understanding. There are 2 million people. They deserve a better future. That future is not with Hamas, who violently took over all of the Gaza Strip in 2007. It's like we put this into the context of something else. A terror organization has ruled there since 2007. It has turned it into a terror horrific base. We saw some of those capabilities on Saturday, Sunday, and we keep seeing the rockets being fired out. This is not something that you or me want to have continuing to exist. We cannot eliminate and eradicate, but we can make an enormous difference on its capability, and we can end its rule over the Gaza Strip. It cannot continue. And add into that, and I keep reminding people, that Hezbollah, as Charlie was saying before, is not just the big brother. It has 10 times the capability, and it too is a terror organization. Are we going to go out now and support Hamas and Hezbollah, who have these terror capabilities? It's as if, like it's Israel's problem. This is not Israel's problem. This is a challenge which goes way beyond there. And we're going to stand strong at a horrific price for us. And I want the people in the Palestinian arena to be safer. I want the Lebanese people to be safer. They cannot be with these horrific terror organizations who hold these weapons, who hold their own people as human shields. That is not a better future for anybody.
Miri Eisin, we really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. My goodness. She was very powerful.
Well, she was very powerful.
I could have gone on talking to her for a long time because there's so many points you'd want to put to her sort of expertise apart from anything else.
And it's important, whatever your thoughts, actually, I think we see it too much in black and white, and what you have to do is listen to people who live it, on all sides, actually, but then think about it and come to your own conclusions. But you listen to what she had to say, how incredibly powerful. Anyway.
Absolutely. Right. Well, we've got a few more minutes with you, so we won't waste them. We've got all the sports news and all the showbiz news from Aidan and Stephanie coming up in the next couple of moments.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom. GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sport and showbiz now with Aidan and Stephanie at 9:22. Morning, you two.
Morning.
Let's have a bit of Madonna. Steph, should we?
Yeah, the Queen of Pop. There was a lot of questions whether she would be able to do this tour, the celebration tour of her hits over the past 40 years, but she started last night in superb Mad style. 2 hours, audiences were wowed with the catalogue of her hits. Of course, her fashion was great as well. She did have a couple of hiccups in terms of the sound going off at one point, but other than that, I hear it was a fabulous show.
Oh, very nice. Well, it's be a total sellout, won't it? I mean, just
her fans alone wanting to go and see it.
Yeah, quite right. Aidan, big day for England this afternoon.
Big show this afternoon as well. 4 o'clock in Marseille, a World Cup quarter-final, England against Fiji. It's very difficult, Stephen, to kind of gauge where England are at the moment because they've got a very kind pool. If you look at the teams they've faced so far, Argentina offered a bit of a test. In fact, they've got to the semi-final. As of yesterday, they beat Wales. Japan, Chile, Samoa. Even Fiji, although Fiji won against England in August at Twickenham, it's a very kind draw to get in the quarter-final. And if you look at some of the draws that the other teams have faced, i.e. Ireland, South Africa, France, the proper nations that we expect to be leading this tournament.
The proper nations,
in rugby terms in this tournament, that's all. I don't want to offend anybody. But there's a big opportunity today against Fiji. I mean, I don't know
what time is kick-off?
4 o'clock.
In Marseille?
In Marseille, yeah. And I wonder whether England will be slight favourites in the UK market. I think a rugby observer outside of this country might make Fiji slight favourites. After that, England get into the semi-finals. If they get there, who knows what happens? I wouldn't want to be facing a pedigree nation like England. I've just redeemed myself there.
You have redeemed her slightly.
Very slippery.
Slightly. Now, I'd have to say, if you wanted beauty tips, I'd turn to you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
You always look fantastic.
Joanna Lumley has found one that's quite cheap.
$9.99 for her facial moisturiser. That is how she looks so good at the age of 77. But she has advice for other senior citizens. She says it's not about going for plastic surgery. She said you should avoid any tweakments. But also she said you should avoid getting fat. She says it could be offensive, her saying that, but she said it is due to health reasons why you should try and stay in shape.
So this $9.99 cream I want to know more about. Is it her brand?
No, it's a brand she uses. I'm not going to name it because in case it sells out, but she says it's done wonders for her face.
What's a tweakment? Sorry.
Tweakment, she means like plastic surgery and
Is
going
she
on
saying
to the
she's
knife.
not had any?
No, she said she's naturally like that. And she's quite a beautiful woman.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
I mean, being tall helps.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely. She's got that model-esque figure.
She really has. Well, but she looks very good.
She does, but she says don't put on weight. That's a good way to age.
I think she's probably right there.
Yeah, she probably is right, but it's easier said than done. Some people are more built to be
if you like
slender.
your sweet treats and you like your food.
Well, that's why I'm
you
saying
can't
the
help
fact that she's tall helps.
It does help her. No, not everyone's been blessed with height.
You can quaff the Bollinger without putting on weight, can't you, if you're as tall as Joanna Lumley?
Oh, yes, you probably can. Quick word on Man United, Aidan.
Yeah, that's right. Well, look, we've had 5 bids from the Qatari consortium. The former Prime Minister of Qatar, he's walked away from the bid now. Looks like Sir James Radcliffe of Ineos fame, it wants to buy 25% of United at £1.5 billion. That values the club at £6 billion.
But that won't keep the fans happy, will it?
It won't, because they wanted a full sale. And don't forget, that full sale included £5 billion up front, plus $1 billion on the training ground, the stadium, and to clear the debt.
OK. Aidan, Stephanie, thank you very much indeed. Been good to see you this morning.
Right. Well, we're off for the moment, back next weekend. But, in fact, you're going to be back on Thursday.
Thursday, I'll be back Thursday.
But do stay tuned, because Christopher Hope, our political editor, is next. And he's sitting in for Camilla Tominey on her programme. Don't go away.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News